So now let's talk about 'em. I wanna know what's going on in your head. Let you get it off your chest. 'Cause sometimes that's all that you need. Just a little place where you can vent. When I'm feeling down in the dumps, I talk to Sandra and she always cheers me up. Come on over for some real conversation and a little cup of coffee. We've all been in different situations, so now let's talk about them. I know all the things that you may have heard, but it's always best to get it from them in their own words. The same thing that we all deserve. Come on over for some real conversation and a little cup of coffee. We've all been in different situations, so now let's talk about them. When I'm feeling down in the dumps, I talk to Sandra and she always cheers me up. Come on over for some real conversation and a little cup of coffee. There's no need for any kind of hesitation. Just try to stop me. Come on over for some real conversation and a little cup of coffee. We've all been in different situations, so now let's talk about them.
All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Coffee Talk with Sandra, tonight's edition of Late Night. You guys, we have a very special guest, and I'm very excited. Ladies and gentlemen, Andrew Hoy. Hi, Andrew.
Thank you, Sandra. Hi, Sandra. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Very good. Very good.
Good. Welcome. I'm so glad that you're here tonight.
Good to be here.
Yes. There we go. Things are all of a sudden want to run all wonky. Okay, so where did you get? I'm jumping in. First, let's say hello to everybody. I'm sorry. Over at Pilled, we have Mikey Baseball. We have Ginger. We have Geneseppi. I'm so glad Geneseppi's lurking. We have Joanne. Thank you, guys. I'm glad you're here. We got Bill West over at D Live and Patriot 7. Hello, Rumblers, Kickers. How are you all doing? I'm glad you're here. Okay. So, Andrew, I have to jump into you. And we do have a thank you to do. Thank you so much for the gold pill. Ginger. She gave us a cookie. Thank you, Ginger. All right, you guys, I'm excited. That's why I want to jump in. I heard about you through Robert for Banners of Freedom and Project 314, a.k.a. Pi, which is very cool. It
goes with coffee, right?
It does. Do you have any with you?
Actually, I'm lying because I've never drank a cup of coffee in my entire life.
Yes, you said that. Okay, how have you been able to do that?
Well, right now I'm working on a watermelon LaCroix, which actually tastes more like watermelon rind. Actually, that's watermelon. Kind of reminds me of in Israel they had watermelon ice cream where you ate the red part first, and that tasted like watermelon, and the green part actually tasted like the rind a little bit. So
Really?
It's reminding me of that. Yeah.
You ate the green part.
Well, just the ice cream, it's ice cream, and they seasoned it, they flavored it like rind.
Yeah, that's nice.
Crazy.
Hi, artist. Okay, you said Israel, so you've been to Israel, which, okay, listen, I have to tell you, I watched the interview. I felt like that's what I was supposed to do. Right?
Sure.
because it's very interesting. Now, I feel like, you know, oh my gosh, Giuseppe has never had coffee either. Okay, do you like the smell of coffee?
No, no. I got as a kid. I think with my mother having it all the time, I was repulsed by it so strongly that I just stayed away. So,
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Wow. Wow. All right. So I'm jumping into this. Can you give us a little background? How did Project Pi get started?
I launched it basically on 3/14/15. So that is Gregorian year, March 14th of 2020 or 2015. So it kind of sums into 3/14/15. So you could argue it's the Pi Day of the century, unless you want to count for rounding, which would be the next year, 2016. But it's kind of celebrated as a thing at 3/14/15, and that's when I launched it. But a little less than a year before that, I had made the discovery. So I was doing some kind of other incidental Bible study stuff, and I came upon the part of the tabernacle and the curtains. I'd never studied the tabernacle because it wasn't like, oh wow, this is really a cool thing, because whenever they show it, it's looking like I'm sorry, it's looking like this. It's this uninspirational structure, and so we're kind of taught in the Sunday school world to like, ooh, kind of be reverent towards this thing, and it's like towards this thing. I'm like, no. So nobody really argues. It's kind of like wink and nod. Let's be polite. It's the Bible. We can't cut on the Bible, and so therefore let's just mind our P's and Q's and go on our merry way. Well, I found the pi constant in the book of Exodus, kind of like hidden in plain sight in the plain text, and so once you rearrange some of the parts, the dimensions of that equals 314. And I'm like, as an engineer, I'm like, oh, this is pi. I bet you this thing is round. And started looking, and sure enough, found out that it goes together better when you follow the instructions. So,
Wow. I have to be honest with you. It just really, I know I'm going to sound dumb, and I'm going to do that for the other dumb people, okay? You hear pie, I never really thought of a round pie. Like I always thought mathematical. I wasn't thinking pi round, and when you just said that and then looking at the structure behind you to your left, I'm like round pie. Pi is round.
you betcha. And not only that, but getting into the etymology of pi even. So we think of pi, spell it P-I or P-I-E. So when we talk about it in a circle, then it's just spelled P-I, but P-I-E obviously is a delicious thing to eat. So again, I would eat that with, I don't need coffee. That's if I go to a coffee shop, that's my excuse to actually I go more for brownies, but because the chocolate, I'm guessing the chocolate coffee pairing is always very appealing. So
It
you can
is.
always get a good brownie, a good chocolate brownie there. So that tends to be my advice of choice if I set foot in a place like that. But
Can I ask you a
the
question though? Do you drink
sure,
milk?
not often, not on purpose.
All right, what
Um,
is your drink?
um, I'm apple cider Izzy's. I say that the sparkling water. I do like a pale ale. I do like red wine. But
Okay,
apart from that, I'm I
right
like
along.
soda with sugar. I can't stand NutraSweet type stuff. But
Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry. It makes me happy
okay,
to know that. Okay, okay.
okay. Um, so pi, with spelling with and without the e, but the Greek letter, the marks and the squiggle on it, right? That is what we see in from math class, and that's describing the circle's its circumference relative to its diameter. So diameter is the length across it, and the circle, is a round hole. And so you do a ratio of that, regardless how big the circle is, that is 3.14159 to, et cetera, et cetera. It goes on kind of endlessly, but that letter pi, it doesn't look like anything special in Greek, kind of like a hashtag with a squiggle, but that comes really from the Hebrew pei. In the Hebrew pei, it's the idea of mouth or lip, And so you have the idea of perimeter. So your mouth is a circle, if you shape it right, and with it being the outer perimeter, and it talks about, how the tabernacle is to be like lipped, the frame is lipping the curtains open, etc. Um, so yeah, there's really the allusion within the Hebrew before the Greek there before the Greeks knew what pie was, the Hebrews did. So that's my argument.
Okay, you said before the Greeks knew.
Yeah.
Okay, the reason why, okay, that is on all the churches that I've seen, it's the Greeks that actually have the domes on top of one part that's usually, and I always found that, why do they have that?
Historically, I mean, you can say that the same is true with the Romans, or getting into the Catholics, the Arabs.
Yeah.
If you start looking at domes, one thing that I noticed in Israel, it's like wherever the tabernacle was, reportedly, it seems that they put up a circular structure. So where the Jordanian Jordan River crossing was, which is just north of the Dead Sea, not far from Jericho. You have there's a city there with a like a I don't know if it's a church building, I forget it, but it's a dome. So you got in the old city of Jerusalem, what do we see? The Golden Dome. The idea that these structures are all Roman architecture, or the extent to which it was Greek, I'm not sure. I guess I would have to go back and kind of pour over the Greek ruins and everything. But historically speaking, too, these cultures built on top of ruins. Like the Greeks and the Romans were saying, we didn't build all this. There was someone before us who were building this. And you see the size of the building blocks they use. The same thing is the wall, the Wailing Wall, the Kotel in Israel. What you see down low, subterranean, is really big blocks. I mean, 40 feet long, or I think longer possibly, single solid pieces. And you start going up and up and up, and the higher you go up, the smaller the building materials get, as if to say that these later later cultures that would rebuild seem to lack the building savvy that their forefathers had, which we shouldn't be surprised that ancient man is smarter than us. So
I mean, it's true.
it's contrary to what the how would I say, the people who want to portray ancient man as the knuckle draggers of the world, or of getting into that whole history thing. So it's the evolution versus creation argument, right? So either man was he created broken where he's improved, or was he created perfect and was then, or at least good, right? And where we've devolved in a lot of ways. So um,
Yes, we have.
yeah,
Because when you look at the structures, I mean, just look at the pyramids. They're beautiful and
yep,
well but built. And look at our buildings now. They don't even, they don't have character.
yep. Yeah, look at just in the last few hundred years, some of the big train stations and all that. And, there's a lot on the web on all the Tartarian Empire and things like that. And, whatever a person tends to believe on what happened historically, culturally, et cetera. I mean, there's just some people who are saying we're in a post-millennial time, and others saying that, we're approaching the millennium. It's that whole idea of how is it that these people, these horse and buggy cultures, were able to erect these magnificent um uh works of architecture and everything. It's like, well, chances are it wasn't because their laborers were doing like a lot of they weren't looking for DEI staff, if you follow. It's that all their people, it's like they were working. The amount of dare I say, administrative entropy and social justice pursuits within companies, it just wasn't a core part of the society, the way that we've seemingly structured things in modern times. So
Mm, it's true. I mean, It's amazing to me the structures. Okay, do you think that um, do you think that the people were bigger? I'm just gonna ask it because I don't know what to think of it. I mean, we see bones, we see proofs, but I don't even know what to trust.
We are in that time where I forget who was it that who said that um, when telling the truth will become a revolutionary act, you know, and we seem to be upon those times, and or at least approaching them at the very least. So getting into that which say a certain institute starts with S and ends with Mistonian. Um, let's see, Mythonian rather. Um, or Smithsonian rather. There we go. It's hard. It's almost speaking pig Latin, you know. But
Yeah.
there are accounts of that organization burying. When I say burying in within their museums, any finds of, dare I say, big bone pe or bigger people, bigger skeletal, et cetera, et cetera. There's also claims where the fossil record is showing things like dragonflies, you know, that are 4 foot wingspan and the like, and you know, those I haven't really tested very heavy. You know, there's a guy named you know, Eric Dubay who says there's no such thing as dinosaurs, you know, which is quite an interesting assertion. And they say that all the bones that we see in all these museums of natural history, et cetera, are nothing more than plaster of Paris. Um, and so that again, interesting claim and probably worth testing because it comes back to the whole thing of like, what aren't they lying to us about?
Yeah.
You know,
Is there
within the
anything?
religion, yeah, within religion. So, oh, what was I thinking besides the bones? Oh, the woolly mammoths. This is my favorite of favorites. Okay, so the woolly mammoth. We see the DreamWorks or Disney is, I think it's DreamWorks production, you know, the woolly mammoth and his friend and his saber-toothed tiger
Mm-hmm.
friend and a little squirrel, you know, whatever they're
The
going through
sloth.
the man, yeah, the sloth and yeah, there's some squirrels along the way for comic relief as well.
Yes.
But it's like, isn't this a cute story where or they've encountered what the Ice Age, right? The name of the movie is called Ice Age, and you got these mammoths trekking through the tundra, right? So, okay, first of all, isn't that what they call permafrost? Because I think that's what they call permafrost. Now, if it's permafrost, what are the elephants eating? Is snow cones? They never show Manny stop along the way with his friends while they're trekking to the destination. They're trudging through the snow. They don't have to eat their cartoons, right? But the point on these
That's a good
elephants.
point.
Well, and there's some extremely better points. Is in some of these points being the woolly mammoth. Let's compare this to an animal. Say I don't know, like a camel. It's like do you know you ever heard about that the packs of Arctic camels that have run south as the as the polar caps are melting?
No.
No, of course not, because there's no such thing, right? Because camels are all, you know, they're arid weather or arid climate creatures. You know, they can store water for days. Well, how much water does an elephant drink? I want to say it's like 40 gallons a day or 50 gallons a day or something. And so this whole 40 gallons, 50 gallons a day, you need heat. You need body heat to heat that up. There's in calories, caloric intake.
Yeah.
And this is why an elephant needs to eat so many, you know, pounds of grass a day. Um, and so when they find these woolly mammoths, first of all, it's not hair. It's they call them woolly mammoths. It's not wool. It's hair. You know, so if you want to call your poodle, if you have a poodle, you want to call that its coat. You know, the if you want to call that hair, or you can call it hair. You could call it fur, but most people won't call it wool. You know, and so there is a difference in the hair and the follicle and in the structure and the like a polar bear has its fur has erector muscles that help it stand up. Okay. to help it space out with air, shed the cold. It also has oil and it's also hollow. Okay, so this is an insulating barrier. Whereas if you look at an animal like a camel, um, or say, getting into the human animal, it's like, well, a hairy armpit, and what a pleasant thought, but it's not underarm wool, okay? It's hair. And
Yeah.
so what does hair do? Hair wicks away sweat, okay? It wicks away sweat that helps the cooling and increases the surface area and helps the moisture evaporate. But what are we told? We're showing the Ice Age creature, right? Because it's elephant. Why could they find them frozen? Well, it's not that they just find them frozen. They find them frozen with grasses in their stomach and buttercups in their mouth, like flowers, like something you'd expect to see on the plains of in the month of July or August in Siberia, etc. So the question then really becomes, how did it freeze, or how did it die and freeze so fast that it froze the innards inside of it to the point where uh, it froze so fast that the stomach acid couldn't digest it. Okay, so when you have that kind of rapid, dare I say, climate change, so this isn't
Yeah.
something from cranking out some more, it's not from you driving your SUV, it's this happened so suddenly and so fast to the point where these animals suffocated, froze to death, and were preserved right there in place. And next to these, there's other animals they're familiar with. You've heard of horses, you've heard of bison. These woolly mammoths are found in frozen deposits with these other creatures. So this whole Ice Age narrative is again part of the other big lie, and part of the whole. This is coming from the same people who say there's no big bones out there. So to go back and answer your question roundabout, sorry that it took me that long to get there, but hey,
No, I
we're
like
there.
this. I like it. I like that. Um, so it's basically a flash freeze. It has to be something
Absolutely.
like that. So what would cause a flash freeze?
Well, that's an excellent, excellent question. And I cannot give you an absolute answer, but I can tell you that according to one book I read, there were scientists at Birdseye. So, we haven't had frozen vegetables for forever. They started flash freezing them in what is it, the 40s or the same time. It wasn't long after they invented the refrigerator that plugs into the wall, right? So people used to have ice boxes and that was they were fetching ice, cutting it out of lakes with reciprocating handsaw type thing, and they would store this in sawdust in like large warehouses, right, to keep the ice, until like, until at least June or July, to the point where you could have fresh, produce again, whatever, where you didn't need the refrigeration. Well, um, what was I going to say with the ice? So after that, they made big refrigeration machines that did that, and then after that, of course, the household refrigerator. But as they're making all this stuff, they made it so that they would flash freeze vegetables, like green beans, corn, or whatever. And so they threw this question at the bird's eye vegetable scientists years ago with the woolly mammoth and say, how is it that okay, so you have basically a time a clock, if you will, that you're racing against. And that when you were to kill a normal elephant on the plains, let's say you got poachers who are killing them for their tusks and everything. You shoot the animal dead, it dies, and then it sits there, and what happens is the stomach starts to digest the grasses, right? The acid, because the acid's still the acid after the animal dies. And so for it to have died with the grasses in the state it is, you can kind of back calculate how much acidic decay you have and how much time that takes. And they were estimating that it would have taken I want to say it was 6 to 8 hours or is it 4 to 6 hours at like minus 150 degrees below zero. So that's how fast they would have had to flash freeze. These animals are so well preserved that it was common when I say folklore that like Alaskan, like dog sleep and Siberian dog sled teams, would sometimes find these things, thawing, and they would feed their dogs, the fresh meat from these frozen woolly mammoths. So our whole our whole set of narratives we're sitting on is just like, and you can bring that up, and these people will just shut it down. They're just like, I actually contacted the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel because I live in Wisconsin, and they had this article about the Ice Age, and I wrote the person the writer of the article, and I said, don't you realize that this, that, and the other thing, and they're like, well, that's for the scientists, and that's not for us to decide. It's kind of like, so you're saying there's no such thing as, so truth and very opposing opinions don't matter in your form of journalism. That's the world we
Basically,
live in. So,
it's like to actually think for yourself and have a question. I don't know that people are, what, are they not ready for that?
it's not
Because,
always encouraged. It's not always
yeah,
encouraged.
especially if you don't have an answer. Like that part's got to kind of, you know, that's probably why. Because they're like,
Yep.
what do we say to that?
Yep.
Yeah, very interesting. I do think, like, have you seen, do you ever look at the pictures of President Trump? Do you ever see, like, any of the big people around him? The giants? They look like giants.
Well, if we're talking of his Baron,
Well,
Baron's pretty
Barron's
big,
tall.
right?
Yes, he's very, very tall. But there's been pictures of, like guys as tall as, the airplane, what is it, the engines? Like they're as tall up as that. I mean, it makes sense to me because how would they have such large structures?
Yeah. If you ever go to Petra, so Petra is right down by Israel. Going in the southern part of Israel and driving a little while. But so that's on Indiana Jones, right? The last one, the Last Crusade with what's his name? Sean Connery.
Yes.
At the end they go to Petra. That's where they get the cup. And you see that, in the movie it looks big, but in real life it looks bigger. And why on earth would they make this cavern with such a high um with such a high doorway? You know, you have to ask the question, who's that for? And fee fi fo fum, that to me sounds like, part of the history, the idea, there's just some people who believe Nephilim are giants, and other people who are saying, well, these are just well, it kind of gets into that sons of Seth, philosophy and everything. But if you read the Bible and take it seriously, you have Goliath from Gath, right? And Goliath is such and such size, and he was actually small compared to Og, king of Bashan, who's referenced, I want to say, in Deuteronomy, the size of, I want to say it's Deuteronomy, the size of his bed is recorded. Whether it's if it's 10 cubits or something, I don't know. I'd have to go back and look, but the point is and maybe that turned into like he was 10 feet tall. So, they give it a size of Goliath, and it also talks, I think, about his spear. Getting into that, the size of that being, the size and the weight, where it didn't match what a normal person is. So realizing, that a lot of people will say that a cubit is measured from fingertip to elbow. So getting into like a 18-inch measurement, or what have you. And I think there's reason to believe that when I say there's other and earlier cubit standards too, which, the fact that this is a convenient reference point, it's a built-in measuring, but not every man is the same size. So it's like the foot, is it that all feet
Right.
are the same length? No. Um, what was I going to say with the feet? So the size of the feet. is that really a unit of length, or is that a convenient approximation? Kind of we were told in grade school, it's like, well, some king had a big long foot, or he wanted to become the standard of all things. That is the nature of humanism, is where man is the measure of all things, right? And so, getting into the foot versus the what do you call it? The cubit. There's also the hand span or the spans, it's made reference to, or the hand breadth, possibly. So we do have some built-in, body parts that will give us similar results, but I've seen a special showing how the Egyptians actually were, had multiple cubit systems as well as, it seems like they were actually using the metric system with water. The Hebrew word miter is the idea of rain. So you hear the word raindrop, think of like a meter, right? So you think, what does that have to do with one? And they're saying that the Egyptians were using water drops to determine a standard, kind of like a centimeter size. And that I've only heard that from one source, but Egyptians are known to have multiple cubits, and you can see in the museum there they have a stick showing like a common cubit and a royal cubit. So between the common, royal, and the sacred, there's different cubits, and with this thing here, you ask how big is it, and its distances of the parts are measured in cubits. And so whether the small one is 18 inches, so it's a foot and a half. And so when we get back to our David and Goliath story, and you look at you start looking into those measurements there, it's like, well, even if the people were bigger back then, if the standard people were bigger and they're using body parts for a measurement tool, then we have to say that was a abnormally big person. You just
Yeah.
kind of can't get around it. So I don't think that the whole population was that big, but again, how much have they obscured or what's the word for it? Misled us in our textbooks, et cetera, et cetera. The paleontologists and things like that, I would not trust. So
There's there's a movie, Jack and the Beanstalk. I have kids, so but Jack and the Beanstalk, actually they go and he climbs the beanstalk and it's a land of giants. And I think it's plausible. And I say that, here's why I say that. They've messed with our food, they've messed with our water. There are things that they've done that could, affect our growth. I mean, Greg Harvey, he's a friend of mine. I'm not sure if you've met him, but we were talking, and I said, "Man, our generation, we just seem like, we're aging so well." And he's like, "We're the age of preservatives." And I was like,
Twinkies. Yeah.
like, okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. You know.
Well, I think getting into the original GMO, so and everyone has problems with the idea, that uh in the days of Noah, it's like, well, is the flood worldwide? Is it a local thing? Is it just legends, etc. I believe it's worldwide. And getting into what had happened and that led up to that, and it talks about how all men, all flesh had corrupted its ways and stuff like that. And between Noah and is it Jubilees or Enoch and Jasher or Yashar, the whole thing of what happened, and it talks about how all the flesh had gone corrupt, or it corrupted its way. It's like, well, you tell me that there was a giraffe just walking through through the wilderness there, and suddenly said, you know what, I'm going corrupt. It just that doesn't make sense, right, from an interpretation standpoint. But when you hear these stories about the Watchers and things like that, and what have we always told by the ancient alien people? It's like that we are getting back into this whole thing where our space brothers seeded us, that we don't come from God, but rather the people, these star people came and descended and brought mankind were they bred with apes or whatever to make humans. There's a mix of different things. I mean, the doctrine, it's arguably one of panspermia, right? Pan being many and sperm, the idea of this is how we came about as people. And so either you can take a creation narrative, which a lot of the atheist types don't like to do, and the reason they don't like to do that in general is because there's some element of conscience that is disturbed, or they got a bone to pick with the Almighty, right? So it's like, well, he wasn't fair, and so therefore he can't be good, so therefore I can't trust him, so therefore he's not real. It's like, well, that's really not a line of thinking as far as that's a line of feeling, okay?
Yeah.
It's a line of emotion. So when you want to get into that kind of emotion, well, just recognize it as such. It's like, well, you ask some atheists, how do you know there's no God? Well, because I hate him. It's like that's really not, rational. And but you will find when you start drilling down that, the perceived injustice of God is a reason that they object to his reality. They want to export all these things, and they want to invent a scientific process whereby man began, where they're not content with having this God who is pre-existing create us. That to them is so egregious, because why? They have character issues, and they have issues with his character. And that is the essence of atheism. Agnosticism is at least honest in the sense, saying I don't know if there's a God. But the irony is atheists are, they are the very thing, they're professing to be the very thing they say doesn't exist, which is an omniscient being. So they say that they know beyond a shadow of a doubt that there is no God. It's like, well, how do you know for a fact? Did you check under that rock?
Yeah.
Did you look behind that tree? It's like they don't have infinite knowledge, and yet they're trying to present themselves as if they've got that. And so that's the crux. So this whole, our space brothers came, this is an inversion of Genesis 6 teaching. And so getting into this idea that before the flood, that all the flesh had gone corrupt. The other books speaking this whole idea that these space brothers, that these fallen angels came and corrupted man. So with the corruption of man, well, it then stands to reason, in what way are they corrupting them? If they're corrupting them to make them giants, to try to make man in their image, it stands to reason that that was their ambition. So I tend to think, and that gets into the whole thing. Is it good and fair? Was God too mean to flood the world and kill everyone and everything, every man, woman, and child? It's like, well, at that point, I would argue that many of those people, or all those people, arguably, were not people, in that they had become genetically corrupted with angelic, I guess, DNA, for lack of better description. So once you kind of realize that, then it doesn't sound as, when I say just ruthless and angry and barbaric, that it's like, no, I got to put a stop to this, because this isn't what I created, and this is an abomination, because all it does is, turns to cannibalism. There's all these stories about how they consumed all of mankind. So in the New Testament, you have the
Wow.
battle of the wheat and the tares, right? So
Yeah, no, this is good. I've never even went that far in my thinking and asking that question, you know. I just figured, I'm going to be honest with you. I know there's I don't have the address, but God talks about making a decision what he's going to do with his people. And and the thing is he even cares about the innocent animals. So I'm like, God's not doing anything like that. That was not, because he doesn't want to hurt even the animals. He doesn't want that. So, it's very interesting.
well, the story of Jonah is an interesting one too. This whole idea of, and that's kind of tied in with arguably an eclipse, right? So
Yeah.
this whole thing in this time, what happened in the time of Jonah? Well, he came in, talked a message of repentance, So what did they do? They repented in sackcloth and ashes, and they even put it on their animals. It's like, well, why would you put sackcloth and ashes on your animals? That sounds just retarded, right? It's like, um, and what if you start looking at what you can use sackcloth and ashes for, you can use it as bandages. Okay, so think of them from going to whipping their animals to suddenly bandaging their animals. So that is them being repentant and say, you know what, we're doing this evil stuff. I'm going to stop, whipping my poor beast of burden here. I'm going to heal him.
Wow.
You know.
Wow. Okay, let's sidebar it for a second. Sidebar. Okay. I know I brought this up earlier, but I think this is important for people to understand where you're coming from. You actually went to Israel to learn Hebrew.
Yep.
Will you tell us about that? Like what got
Look,
you there?
uh, um, what got me there is I was laid off of a job, and I was also in the process of looking for another one, and the one that I was looking for wasn't coming through on the schedule I'd hoped. So I said, well, I guess right now my option is Israel. So I basically I had been studying myself in the States, just doing self-learning type stuff for I don't know, maybe a couple of years, where I had enough time, to pass out of some of the lower introductory classes in Israel. And I was looking at it, it's like, well, I really like doing I like the Hebrew study and all the revelation, it's kind of Bible on steroids type thing. I shouldn't say steroids because steroids are corrupt, but but you get the point.
We get the
It's
point.
supercharged. We'll just say supercharged.
Yeah.
And so, being able to, decipher it, it's just a huge deciphering tool that, keeps you from arguing, in a sense, because once you go back to the original text, you're like, okay, well, it could mean this and it could mean that. There's more ands, there's more options, more optionality and revelation that's conveyed there. So, in recognizing all that, so this is what was kind of prompting me, and knowing that I looked at a few programs in the States, and it's like, okay, if I do this at this university, I can only get this many hours a day. So I'm like one of those, moderation is for wimps, So I have life balance problems, but that's a whole nother story. But
You
but
just
but
go all
seriously,
in.
yeah, I went all in. And so in going all in, that was the place to do it. And you're going on, 4 hours, 5 hours a day of just intensive Hebrew learning. So and then you're in the culture, and at that point when they don't like you to try to speak Hebrew because they want to practice their English on you instead. So it just makes it hard. It's like, come on, work with me here. Just let me fumble through your language. And it's a very just a different shift because if you're obviously born and bred in the US, and then you're starting to see foreigners struggling through English as a second language. English has got to be a much harder language to pick up, although we have cornered the world's market on television probably. So a lot of whether it's Israelis, there's a lot of cultures throughout the world that have been raised on American television or in movies and things just as much as. So there's a
Wow.
lot of in the fact that English, it's a language of business, and dare I say of Babel. It's a Babylonian system. It's a mixture. It's a mixture of no less than three languages, and bits and pieces from everywhere. And we think of it as normal, but going back to like, okay, why do you park in a driveway and drive on a parkway? It doesn't make any sense.
It, it's true. Do you know
You know,
why?
um, Do I know why? What we use that?
Yeah. Are they doing that? Because I feel like it's a tool for, I'm going to sound, it's to confuse people. To, you don't mean what you say. So you can say the truth, but we don't believe you because it's like the opposite. It's like the opposite game, even in the language. When we say, I've gotten into this with Robert and Jamie, when talking about the different words that we use. So I think that they have us in the English where it is a way to confuse spellcasting. Thank you. Code word ice
Yep.
cream, spellcasting. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That is its spelling. You are casting spells. And that whole out of the mouth, this is what we speak, and or what I say, this is what we become, as far as I will create, abracadabra, I create as I speak type thing. So the fact that there's power in speech, it's a really important idea. And getting into if you ever start studying terms in the rabbit holes of the internet, it's the idea of like dog Latin. So it's like, well, I thought it was pig Latin. It's like, no, that's just replacing the first word and saying a, or ekvis bray is for breakfast, right? That's pig Latin, but dog Latin. How English transitioned, or there's an entire vocabulary that was, as I understand, kind of built on confusion and deception, and the extent to which
Right.
our modern English is kind of from that. It is really, there's a backwardsness to it, and one case in point, like it's the Hebrew word snake. The Hebrew word for it, or I'm sorry, the English word snake, the Hebrew word nachash. And so you can hear nakash, snake, right? So it's a backwards transposed, and there's a number of English to Hebrew words that are like that. So, but I also had a global history teacher actually he's also my Russian history teacher in college. He used to say that of all the dissimilar languages, English is more similar to Hebrew than any other language, which is interesting. So you get into the issue of like, okay, we're told that our King James Bible, came about what 400 years ago, right? And so before that, and whether the Gutenberg Bible and all that, as far as history. But I was doing some research on English Bibles. It sounds like they're claiming to have parts of them going back to 500-600 AD in Scotland. And it's like, well, that's not a story that's quite familiar to the popular narratives that the church kind of puts forth. So the question is, how did it morph into what it is? And who's holding their thumbs on the scales of language, and getting into what governance, and then there's at some point, we have to look to ourselves and say, well, I'm willfully ignorant and participant to the system, and it blows my mind that all these Christian schools, you'd think that the languages of the Bible would maybe be of some importance to them, where they would start teaching their people that. But they, that's just stuff for the pastor. If you're not a pastor, you can't understand it. And like, why don't you just say stupid forever?
I
Um,
think that's the ignorance is bliss. Like they've tried to push that so that people will stay because
yep,
it is a little shocking. As you begin to learn and become aware and you're allowed to see the truth, it can be disturbing too. It's like,
sure,
what in the
sure.
world?
And at some point, we realize as citizens, as dare I say, lay people, as congregants, as church members, and we're not saying, okay, I want to get back to brass tacks here. I want to get back to the original. Until enough people say, let's do this, we don't change the culture to the point where we're doing it. And so that's why I'm basically, and this is a case in point, right? It's like I discovered this because I wasn't reading in this language, I was able to flush it out, whereas otherwise I would have been spinning in circles, working against English contradictions and translations that are based on interpretations and you really have compound interpretations because the first person going from Hebrew to English is interpreting, and then after it's in English then you read it again and you interpret it as a reader, and at the end of it, it's like one of those games of telephone where like all is lost in the exchanges, and then tradition sets in and people start looking at images, and so again they're all the more likely to be seeing this as they read, and so that becomes the backdrop with which you're processing the language.
You know what's interesting too is you're looking at the box because it's basically a box. And then you look at how they're working so hard to put everybody in a box. Uh, you're this kind of person, you're that kind of person. It's so intentional. I think that is what really gets me more than it's so intentional.
That there's something to be said, that polarizing mentality. There's a good separation of the holy and the unholy, but getting into this idea of divide and conquer, right? Because a house divided against itself will not stand, right? So I think that part of those putting people in boxes with labels, especially in religious contexts, it's like, well, I'm a Methodist and he's a Presbyterian, so I can't trust him, or, whatever the expectations that are imposed upon you. It's like we're no longer individuals. We're organisms defined by labels that someone else is assigning arbitrarily. So, yeah, that's a problem. That's so that starts to shape. With this thing, there wasn't the Baptist corner of the camp, which was next to the Catholic corner of the camp, which was next to the Lutheran corner. No, you wouldn't put the Lutherans next to the Catholics. You'd space them out with let's see, I picked on the Methodists and
Don't
the
forget the
Presbyterians
Presbyterian.
now.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. So okay, the Pentecostals. We'll put the
Yes.
Pentecostals little buffer between the Lutherans and the Catholics, right?
Yeah.
But my point is like this was it was all Israel, that was the extent of that. That's just Israel. That was everyone's camp.
Okay. Can we get a little controversial?
No.
Really? I'm asking anyway. All right. I am not well versed, okay? So I'm coming with I do think that that's very interesting that it looks like, maybe our earth. I'm just saying it's very similar with the round and the okay. And then another thing is uh I think all the different religions were placed as well so that we have that fight that's going on. And even in the schools, they're putting people in boxes. They're with the kids. They're putting the kids in all these different boxes, which is such a plan. Now my question is when you read because you have interpreted from the original Hebrew Revelation. So when God is talking about Israel, he's not talking I don't think he's talking about the government Israel or the land Israel. I think he's talking about his people, Israel. Am I off?
Okay, so I mean, typically the Revelation is Greek. There's also arguably Aramaic, and then getting into the idea where there's also Hebrew translations of like Hebrew Matthew and everything. So the fact that the New Testament was written in Aramaic as well as Greek Most Bible scholars are saying solo scriptura, are where it's that is only divinely inspired in the original language. Hebrew, Aramaic in a few Old Testament books like the Book of Daniel, and then also in Greek in the New Testament. So, kind of recently, I happened upon a thing, on the eclipse, and as it turns out, the Bible codes seem to work in Aramaic very well with amazing accurate with amazing corollaries, I guess this is the point. And so I've always been, partial in my belief that the Greek was not the original. And you mentioned the book of Revelation. Like there's a place where it says, it was written on his thigh, the Lord our righteousness, or something like that. Well, the Hebrew word there is, you have the word regel, which is often translated as leg, and then you have degel, which is like flag, when it's banner or flagpole, dare I say. So to have the Lord our righteousness written on someone's leg is kind of ridiculous, on their thigh, right? But this is how it gets translated in some cases, and it's because the Hebrew dalet looks almost just like the Hebrew resh. And if you were using a sloppy pen, your calligrapher and your translator wasn't that great, you suddenly have the Lord our righteousness, written on somebody's thigh, when in fact you'd have that as a banner, right? You'd be marching with a banner, the Lord our righteousness. You wouldn't be writing it on your thigh because, the Bible talks about not tattooing yourself, so it's not going to be having that as an expectation. So that's one case in point. But your question on Israel, so who and what is Israel, and the whole Yeshar El. Well, part of it, you have to realize that Israel is scattered to the four corners of the earth. And so this whole thing, in New Testament, you got Messiah saying, by their fruits you will know them. Okay. And you've got the wheat and the tares. So to say that the tares are Israel, so you got the issue with the modern state. There's a lot of people that go to great lengths to say, well, none of those people are actually Jews and all that. And if you say Jews, the term Jew is really the idea of Yahudah. You want to say Yehuda is the Hebrew, name pronunciation for, or Yehudim in the plural. And so that comes from the word uh, uh, hodu, the idea of praise. So this is something that the Jews were particularly appointed by name, in a sense, because that's getting into the mothers. So if you go back to, you got Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So Jacob is the patriarch of the 12 tribes. The 12 tribes of what? Of Israel. Okay. Israel not being just the 12 tribes of Judah, it's the 12 tribes of Israel. And so realizing that Judah is one of those 12 tribes, and then formed a nation. So historically speaking, you had the kingdom was united at the time of Saul, and then actually at the time of David there was a small split, or before Saul, his son, but then under David it became united, and so it's united at the time of David, united at the time of Solomon. Solomon, his son is really not a good guy, Rehoboam. And Rehoboam says, you know what, you think my father was taxing you, etc. I'm going to just, my father was nothing compared to what I'm going to do to you. And so the northern kingdom said, you know what, we don't need these people. And then they had a king, King Jeroboam, who said, hey, don't bother going to Jerusalem anymore to worship. Just stay up here. And they set up what? Golden calves, basically. So you got the north and the south of Israel split at that time. The north became known as Israel, and the south became known as Judah. And so it split into two countries, where it was like that for centuries. And they would actually civil war, or they would join each other's enemies, in some of these civil war things, right? So this is historically. So the time of Messiah, you've got the land of what? Judea. So Judea was like part of that southern tribe of Judah that had remained. And so we get the term Jews, and actually the tribe of Simeon was kind of to the south, but Benjamin was wrapped up in Judah, and there's Levites that were wrapped up in Judah. So to say that, those are now Israel or Israelites, it's like, yes, they're of Israel, but they're not the totality of Israel. Okay. So that's one core idea that even Jews, Jews will tell the story of the Passover. They'll say, well, the Passover and the Jews, and the Pharaoh oppressed the Jews, or they'll say the Jewish tribes. And the Jewish tribes, that's definitely a misnomer because it's the Israelite tribes or the Hebrew tribes because they were 12 tribes and Judah was one of them. And Judah happened to be remain. And it says in Hosea, it says, of the northern kingdom, it's like you're going to be called like uh, not my people, but the southern tribes then, for the sake of David, I'm going to preserve Judah. So this is part of that narrative. So this is how, at the time of Messiah, the predominant dwellers of the land, Judea, but there were northern tribes people in the north, and so you have this people of Samaria or Samaritans, and so you had an intermingling between the northern tribes and places that they had been exiled to. They were forced out of the land and kind of forced into intermarriage almost, from as far as repopulating this land. So as far as the Jews were concerned, it's like, first of all, they weren't to be trusted because they were northern tribes people. And second of all, whether or not they were ethnically, whatever. So when we read about Jew and Gentile, there is the notion that as far as the Jews were concerned, if you weren't Jewish, then you were a Gentile. And part of it is because that prophecy from Hosea came true, where the northern tribes didn't know who they were. Okay. And that is a really important idea that most Jews don't even ruminate on at all. They don't ponder that, and it's just a strange thing where it's forgotten. It's the same way that at the time of Joseph, when Joseph was sold into slavery, what did Judas say? Well, our brother's no more. We had another brother, but yep, he's just not around anymore. It's like, well, you sold him into slavery. That's what you did.
Yeah.
And so there are some among Jewish rabbis and leadership that understands that that the northern tribes were part of Israel and were scattered, but as far as they're concerned, they're just like, well, they're just lost. I personally believe that they were lost largely within Christendom. And so you have, today's modern Christians who are, rediscovering, these roots, and they'll say they're Jewish roots, and it's like, no, they're not necessarily Jewish roots, because they're Joeish roots. When I say Joe, of the country when I say of Ephraim, so jo Joseph has two sons. One is Ephraim and one is Manasseh. Ephraim is the younger one with the double portion blessing, and the country was kind of following, Ephraim, the younger brother, or in its multitude and its makeup. So this whole idea of who and what is a Jew, who and what is Israel, is something that's very confused, and you even see it poorly translated in the book of Romans. And so this is part of why people are confused about it, and this whole idea of ingrafting. You're not ingrafting thistles into an olive tree. You're not even engrafting figs into an olive tree. You're getting wild olive branches, which are scattered throughout the wilderness, and the Father's gathering those to put back into the olive tree. And if you don't do that, if you don't cut out these old branches and put in fresh ones, you don't get produce out of your olive tree, which is an interesting,
That is
a great
interesting.
agricultural factoid, I guess. So,
Wow. Okay, I have a question as far as when you were in Israel, what was it? Is the culture, how different is it compared to here? Is it culture
um,
shocking?
one of the things that in the culture that shocked me the very most is when I was in Joppa, which is the port that Jonah sailed from, and there was a statue. But when I say a statue, there was a head, a massive head. It was probably 6 feet tall or something. Native American headdress, chief, like a Native American chief. So when you go to Israel, you see things that you would just never think you'd see before. And this idea that uh, the how would I say the cultural influence in Israel is so varied and um, so widely diverse. It would make New York blush in that sense because the Jews who came back there after World War uh, what was it? It was World War II. So the all of Europe is just like was very kind of when they found out what Hitler had done, everyone was just like, oh, this is so terrible. And so between being guilt-ridden and the Jews being kind of a mixture of hated and displaced and also without a inclination to trust anyone, they all came back. So you have like, people from Poland and Hungary and wherever else, Eastern Bloc countries. Uh, so as they're returning to Israel, this was mandated by the um, by the UN. It was the countries universally said, hey, the Jews can go back, right? And this is something as they worked in. So every time that you've had government involvement with land reappropriation, this is when you've had problems over there. So I've been told by Jews in Israel that before like the Balfour Declaration and before 1948 and when the Israel got the statehood thing, that the Jews in the land and the Arabs tend to live side by side in relative peace. So it's when the governments get involved and say, okay, now this land is yours, now this land is his, now they start fighting,
Yeah.
and it's almost like I read an article about when you have when I say an article, there's just a Facebook thing passed around talking about black ants and red ants. Okay, so when you take them and you put them in a jar, they won't fight, but when you shake them up, then they start fighting against each other. Which is interesting claim. It's like, well, who's doing this? Well, it must be this guy over here, right? It's like, no, it's the guy shaking the jar.
Yeah.
And so, I would liken a lot of what they've had go on, in the negative in the military sense, with that. And so there's a lot of secular Jews came back and with a lot of communist influence. They bought land from Arabs and started communes. In some cases, then the Arabs would say, even after they bought it, "Oh, you stole this land from me." So you have a lot of there's certain amounts of he said, she said things, and like with Gaza, most people right now seeing the Gaza war, as recent October 7th, which I think is part, it was to say that the Israelis weren't aware of the invasion is to me a little bit of a stretch, right? But you have to go back 20 years now, or 19 years, what have you, to the Gush Katif, the 2005 President Bush. Okay, so President Bush was basically this idea of land for peace. So you have these displaced people, referred to as Palestinians, that they need a place to live, and so between when Israel became a state, oh, let's see, this land was not Palestinian land per se. Okay, so with that area in Gaza, which is incidentally where Goliath and his brothers came from. It's, um,
Are you
so you have
serious?
them, yeah, yeah. You have a lot, Ashkelon, Gaza, Gath, those places. Those are coastal regions along that part of the Mediterranean. But I would say the Gaza. So this Gaza Strip was not the Gaza Strip before 2005. Is reappropriated as that. So there were Jews who had like fine schwanky homes along the Mediterranean. Big money into it and this and that. And they were forced to evacuate their houses because the U.S. said, you're going to give up this land now, right? And with that, they sat on their rooftops. So when was this? This was on the 9th of Ab. So if you start listening to things, relative to the Hebrew calendar, so the month of Ab it falls in summer between July and August. This is, when when it's hot outside and temps are at their worst. But historically speaking, when Israel rejected the land, when the spies came back and they said, well, this land that God is giving us is no good. So this is when that land became, or I'm sorry, that day rather became cursed in Israel's history, is in the 9th of Ab. Okay, so since then, you have other things starting, like World War I starting about the 9th of Av. You have the Jews getting kicked out of Spain on the 9th of Av. The temple destroyed, the first temple destroyed on the 9th of Av, the second one destroyed on the 9th of Av. So you have all these echoes of this curse day. Well, guess what happened in the United States? In the United States on the 9th of Av, 2005, when we were busy forcing Israel to give up this land, you had the New Orleans, the people were on their rooftops begging the government to take them off the roof. There is a book out there called As America Has Done to Israel, and it tracks all the bad foreign policy that the U.S. has had, the adversarial policy that we've had towards Israel, showing how it's related to hurricanes and wildfires and all sorts of stuff. So again, for context, when the Jews, or when Israel was forced to give up Gaza, so this is an area that was being governed, altogether by Israel, and so now it's been governed by the worst of the people in Gaza. So you get into this idea that the government ends up being, a matter of public consent, right? So our government is by consent, but guess what? If you're in a monarchy or a dictator, it's still by consent. Who says that person's a dictator? Who says that person's a king? Well, they got all these strong army guys, whatever. Well, is it whose people are paying their taxes? Who's enabling that? So when you have an entire culture that's bent on, destructive things, what do you do with those people? Because, when those people attack civilians, like 60% of them plus cheer. This is where they're at. It's like, hooray, we've killed our enemies. That whole phrase, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Well, the word Palestine, it comes to the Hebrew word. You've heard the Bible story about the Philistines. Well, the Philistines, Pelishti in Hebrew, it's the idea of invaders. So these people who are presently, living in Gaza, they're living on land that the U.S. forced Israel to give up in exchange for peace with these people groups, and those people, they were not native to Israel. They came in after the World War II settlers, as I understand. They came in from southern Jordan. So this whole scenario of what we're seeing in Gaza, it's like, well, when you're living on someone else's land that was stolen by a government or reappropriated, but you're going to be mad. And so I think that's what they have going on. And if you look at, Israel's being accused of being an apartheid state, but what about Egypt? Egypt has got a border wall about the same, because it's like we don't want those people either. So
Okay. All right.
that's an interesting
I need to ask questions.
okay.
Okay. So the people in God. Okay. We were just talking about this last night. Did you watch my show last night?
I saw part.
Oh, aw. Were you happy? I hope you liked it. Whatever. Anyway, okay. Here's the thing. I understand the people. Okay, so the people, they actually brought themselves there on purpose, knowing it was stolen land.
You could argue that. Because I mean that goes back more years before when those people, as I understand, they came out of southern Jordan, and they started to come up there for when I say for work, etc. Because when the Jews returned to the land, they started making it prosper. If you read what Samuel Clemens, a.k.a. Mark Twain, wrote about the land, he toured Israel and he's like, boy, this is just a wasteland, but it was prophesied that like once Israel returned to the land, then it would start to bear its fruit and to prosper. Ben Gurion, the first prime minister, was basically saying, we have to fight the desert or it will fight us. And if you look at how much greenery exists now because they've been planting trees and vineyards, when they left Gaza, they left like greenhouses and all sorts of stuff, and I agree that those people on one hand they're kind of quarantined in there, but on the other hand, what do they do with it? What do they do with all the international aid? They make bombs that throw over the fence. The number of people.
What?
I spent some time in Africa and I saw while I was there I saw they were selling on the street basically was it UNICEF? It was it was big tins, like 2 gallon tins of cooking oil. They were selling it on the street. It says blatantly, it says not for sale, right? So this is foreign aid that comes into the country. Some warlord grabs it all, takes control of it all, and he starts selling it on the free market. This which was supposed to be humanitarian aid. And this is, I think, the very essence of what's been happening in Gaza for as long as they've been a people to be pitied. And they're people to be pitied because how and why? Do they belong there? It's like the Jordanians don't want them either. So you get into this whole thing of what to do with these people. Now, I think that October 7th was highly suspicious as far as
Me
did
too.
Israel really let their guard down to that extent and turn it. It's like that to me is not a credible narrative that they
I
were that
agree.
like caught off guard. Oh, this is a surprise to us. But to say it's a justification to go in there, but guess what? If you got people who are making Molotov cocktails and throwing them at you all day long, you got to say after a while, enough's enough. You got to stop this.
Okay.
And the
So
fact that the citizens of Gaza are okay with it.
okay, I just need to go over this in my brain, okay? So basically, those people stole the land, and then they also, Hamas is the title of their government. Now,
Which means violence.
yes, so their government that they chose, these people, okay,
That they
okay,
enable, that they
they
enable,
enable.
that they consent to.
It's all because if, kind of like us, like if America would wake up and like put a hold on stuff, can make action. Okay, that's a sidebar. So basically, they're squatters. They're squatters. They're
Yeah.
squatters that are throwing bombs at because we've got Egypt. Egypt has them on one side. You have Israel on another, right?
Yep.
Wow.
So yeah, to liken them to squatters is pretty reasonable. And the people who were born into that, it's been 20 years since they did that reappropriation, and for Israel to set up this big border. Now the irony here is what do we have in the States? We have a border that's being overrun. We've got child trafficking and all sorts of stuff going on right now. And well, what do we think of that? Well, gee, that's just, putting a big border wall up is mean. I don't think that it's mean to say, well, is it mean to put a lock on your front door of your house? It's like, no, you can't just, leave it open door or leave the key in the lock hole, right? Say, come
Hmm.
on in,
Yeah.
there's some people who put up those all are welcome here. It's like, okay, really? So if I set up a tent on your front yard, you're not going to complain? So This is why boundaries need to exist at a private property household level. Boundaries need to happen at a city level, municipal level, and they have to happen at a national level. And so without that, you break that down, you have no rule of law because the people who come in say, well, this is what I do in my country, so therefore it's good, right, and legal. And it's like, well, at some point you need to be able to protect your own and to be responsible for those in your care. And so sometimes it involves excluding people, or when people are doing really bad things, you got to lock them up, you got to or shut them down, and you have to deal with it.
Yeah, I'm just processing in my head.
So the Egyptians, for years don't want anything to do with them, and they're literally a people without a home, and the amount of violence. So the Hebrew word for Arab means mixture, and Arabs, they truly are. They're a mixture of a combination of angry people who don't like Israel, and then there's some of them that are quite okay with it. You got Arabs serving in the IDF. You have Arabs, it gets back into some of these Arab, villages. As long as there are cases where there's peace with Jews, and so the Hebrew word shalom, I'm sure you've heard that said, before, shalom. So shalom having to do with peace. So, or it's a different a greeting, a hello and goodbye greeting. So in Israel, but the Arabs don't say shalom, they say salam. So if you do something as simple as say salam to them, they will treat you with respect. And but if you say shalom to them, they're like, oh, you idiot, Jew loving, preferring, and
Yeah.
that's really where that goes. And it's like, well, that's that they interpret that as like, well, you're favoring them over us. And so something as simple as just greeting them in their own tongue, it's kind of like dealing with like the French or French Canadians. It's like they'll kind of be in that where bonjour, if you don't have the courtesy to try to reach out of your own little like, I'm American, I'm an ugly American, I expect everyone to speak like American. Those English people, they don't speak English, speak American. This is a lot of our national, to our shame, and it's a sentiment that there's a phrase ugly American around the world, and it doesn't come from a vacuum. It comes from bad behavior of Americans that travel, that feel culturally entitled. So it's no different than you have that can happen in any culture, right? And but the Arabs, and I found that a lot of the Arabs in Jordan were far friendlier than the ones in Jerusalem. Sometimes those Arabs in Jerusalem were really, but then again, I've gotten, treated by some Jews in Jerusalem very, very poorly or equally poorly. So I've been treated better by some Arabs and better by some Jews, but I've also been, I feel treated largely very, very good by the Jews, and I won't forget it. And I've been, they've been very the hospitality that they've extended to me. I will die testifying to the fact that their hospitality is largely positive. When I say largely positive, to the point where I feel that their hospitality they've shown to me is better than American Christendom has shown me. So I'll say that.
So Americans are like babies. They're spoiled little brats that, I mean,
Oh, we.
I
I
can
say
see
we.
that.
There's a we factor in there, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true. I get frustrated by foreigners here sometimes. Really, the lack of, like, if you're coming into America, I dare I say I would like you to assimilate, and that means like walk to the right. I just want like regular manners. Like if
You're right.
you,
You got to be driving on the right side of the road, right?
yeah,
Some of that's more than culture. How about not blasting your car horn, everywhere every time. It's not a blinker, it's a car horn, right? So
yes,
there's
yes,
there's some driving etiquette. I think that uh, in Israel, between Russians and Jews and Arabs, you get into different different neighborhoods and so forth. And frankly, this is ironic, so we're talking about bad behavior all over the world, and that it's generally American Jews have more westernized tradition and culture as far as waiting in line, between whether it's Arabs or Russians, they'll push you out of the line. Literally, you're sitting there. There's a line, 2 or 3 deep at the coffee thing. So into my class, morning coffee, and they just come right up beside you as if you're not standing three in line. They'll just cut in right here, and if you're the first person whose turn it obviously is, they will use their shoulder, and they will displace you. So it's that level of aggression. So if you're not holding an arm out to block, you think it's a contact sport. You think it's football or something, or it's very strange. It's so strange that it just grates at your core being, and you're just like, this is so wrong. Somebody needs to to teach you people basic manners. They'll stop in the middle of an intersection, with the light. If the light is turning red, they don't care, and if there's traffic that's right on the other side of it, so that they will T-bone stop that traffic in the other direction, just so they can not lose their. It's courtesy that is that wrong and that bad, and some of the Jews do it, and to what extent they've learned it from the Arabs or from Eastern Bloc countries. When you have Soviet Union, you have lines, bread lines or whatever. You have to fight for whatever you get. And so some of that's been carried over. It's part of the godlessness. It's the atheism at work, or the humanism.
Mm.
And like, when you have humanism, it's man is the measure of all things, and I am a man, and so therefore whatever I have to say is the most important. It becomes you're self-justifying, right, at some point, because there's no one more important than me,
Right.
because and that's from a courtesy standpoint, it's atrocious. It's
It
really
is.
it,
It
it
is
you have to
ego.
experience it. You have to experience it to believe it. And actually, when you're experiencing it, you're in a state of disbelief, because you're like, I can't believe that anyone would try to run in a society this stupid. Because it's
Wow.
just utterly dysfunctional. But we trend that way. And New York City, look at all the foreign cab drivers there, and the heavy on the horn, and just like it's like, does it help to make just copious amounts of noise throughout the city just because you want to go? It's like, it's not going to help anyone move if you're just blasting it. It's like putting a siren on 24/7. Um,
Okay, I will say I use my horn, but I use my horn only to
Continually.
embarrass the people that are walking on the green left arrow. When we only have, I'm in the I'm right in the city. We only have a certain amount of time, and you're deciding to walk. You can't just wait just so we could go left. So I will put on my horn when not other cars, it's actually human beings. I do
It's
that too.
violation of the right of way, right? And,
Yeah.
and it's the pedestrian entitlement mentality that's
Yeah. And,
destructive there.
and my kids are like, Mama. And I'm like, listen, they need to know that's not okay. That's not what we do. So that is where I use my horn. As far as driving, God has really like healed me in a lot of anger and a lot, you know what? Ego. Because I have to get there. So I need to go. And you're not important. I mean, that's been my lesson. And I am a much more laid back driver, realizing like, yo, chill, San. Like, come. So that's from God. I have to say that's a total, you know. And I could always know if something's wrong with me when I drive, because I'm like,
Yeah.
wait, I'm being a little aggressive. Why am I aggressive? You know. Yeah, that's a spiritual part. But
Yeah, so it's a very highly high tension contested place, the roads in Israel, and the traffic. Again, there's different driving courtesies all over the world. Whether you're in Mexico or Egypt, or I've been in different situations. So Egypt, the cars start rubbing up against each other. They're so close, and you just need to keep your hands inside the vehicle. I mean, it really is. If you have a car that's a year old or more than a year old, it's going to have rub marks on the side of it because they start to pinch down that tight as they're all trying to fit in. Um,
Really?
yeah, when I first went to Cairo, I was it'd been my first time there, and I really didn't do that much homework on it. Just was, again, playing my part as an ugly American. And I thought was driving around. It's like, how many people in Cairo? A couple million? The guy's like, no, it was at the time, he's like 26 million, just like 26 million. And so I didn't even realize Cairo was that big. And now I'm sure it's well into the 30s. But just with that kind of that volume of traffic, so they run things without without traffic lights, more roundabouts, and there's just more. It's just it becomes it developed as a different etiquette, and there, they aren't trying to all, me, but it's just like, well, this is just how it all flows. It seems to be far more positive etiquette than there is in Israel, which is kind of ironic. So,
That is
um,
ironic.
yeah.
All right. I do have a question. What is the food like?
Um, It depends which food. In getting into the spectrum of food is speaking to the spectrum of cultures. And because Israel is ultimately the biggest multicultural, assimilation of anywhere in the world. So what is it? It promises. It promises, you'll be scattered to the four corners of the earth. And as they're being called back from this, the first time I was in Israel was 2005, and I went to what's called the Diaspora Museum. So the diaspora is talking about the scattering, right? So the scattering after after the temple fell, after the Romans took over. So, the Jews have been scattered ever since, and more recently regathered in part anyway. And again, not I'm saying the Jews as opposed to all of Israel, because Judah having maintained the identity, right? So it's the Jews that form the synagogues, that all over the world. So you can see in this museum, it was every single, culture and ethnicity. To see like a Chinese Jewish synagogue, obviously very different than a Polish Jewish synagogue, right? And this is not to say there's any like German Joeish synagogues. Again, I'm speaking of Joe from, because you have the Jews and the Joes, and it talks about this in Ezekiel, how basically God's going to take the one stick labeled Judah and one Ephraim. Okay, so this is the northern and southern tribes and the reunification of that. You could argue that the prodigal son in the New Testament is another allusion to that, where the younger brother coming home and the older brother doesn't like the fact he's coming home. But our, what was I going to say? The two house, two stick. I wandered off the reservation intellectually here. I'm trying to get back to your original question. Um, Oh, the food. Sorry. So, seeing all the Jews, their influence within the different cultures, how they've absorbed, and how they've then gone both ways. And so, you get. Let me ask you this: When's the last time you were at a Hungarian restaurant?
I have never been at one.
How about an Italian restaurant?
Uh, Probably like a couple months, maybe a year.
Okay. So, you get into how about a Russian restaurant?
No.
Okay, so Israel took in 1 million Jews over the course of 1990 to 2000. So they went from like 7 million people to 8 million people, adding that many Russians. So there's a certain amount of Russian influence, within their culinary thing, but they've also got, stuff where it seems like straight out of New York, like amazing corned beef. I mean, just amazing. Shawarma is excellent. I want to eat shawarma, and I even took on a liking for falafels. So you get into some of those are more Mediterranean cultures, right? But the ones that are like, Polish and stuff, it's like, well, Wisconsin is very German and Polish, and so there's some of it that's kind of close, like this, earthy, root vegetables, home cooked things, cabbages and stuff. But there's a lot of Mediterranean food then that is, so you have within the Jewish cultures, you have Ashkenazi and Sephardic Jews. So there's two different strains, within the people which are referred to as Jewish. So largely, and so the Ashkenazi, some say they're out of Russia, and when I say out of Russia and say that they're not real Jews, there's then getting into the Sephardic, that the Spanish, the Mediterranean region basically. So you get Jews from Morocco and the Ethiopian Jews are actually black Jews and who were liberated out of let's say liberated rescued out of all that Ethiopia stuff when you saw the Ethiopians starving 30 years ago and stuff, so they or maybe back in the 70s or 80s, I don't know. So they rescued Jews from back then, and so they've assimilated into the culture. So you have just this spectrum. And if you've ever been to New York City is like that, where they have all these different food cultures because they have all these different ethnic groups living in there. So you can find anything. It's hard to find Mexican food in Israel, but their pizza, in my opinion, is extremely bland. Most of it is. But like I said, their shawarma makes up for it, more than makes up for it. But it gets into, again, which fork you are in that. And so on one hand, there's the restaurant side of food and what's served at the restaurants versus Shabbat. So this is part of where I received a lot of really high quality, second to none Jewish hospitality. I mean, I cannot speak well enough for those experiences because they after their synagogue service, they invite you over and you eat, and they're not there to bicker about doctrines or religions and stuff. They're there like, literally to host you, to be uh to engage with you. I mean, this is part of their virtue in that sense. And I've just had the Mediterranean. I am very partial to the Mediterranean influence. My landlady I would say she was a Moroccan Jew, as I recall, and to this day I still make I call it landlady chicken. I nicknamed it after her.
Oh
But
wow.
it's date palm honey and ginger and orange and garlic. It's one of my favorite chicken dishes, and I learned that from my landlady. She hosted me Passover, and the hospitality, Jewish hospitality is excellent. Not as much in the restaurants because they don't like American what do you call it, wait staff is second to none, world class in my opinion. But so they could learn a bit from that. But if they're letting you into their homes, they are amazing in their hospitality. And again, I will not forget it, and I will not keep myself from professing that because we have a lot to learn from them in that. So, but excellent food. They do multiple courses and everything like that. Just
Do
uh,
you do multiple courses at home now? Have you brought any of that into your life?
yeah, yeah. Getting into the Sabbath observance type thing because I'm like, well, and for a while I was actually visiting synagogue kind of nearby, and the synagogue is Orthodox, and they would because I'd learned some Hebrew and everything like that. They were interested in I spent some time with them between working on my Hebrew more and getting into understanding more about some of the Orthodox services, etc. And they in the States they were doing it, and I started thinking it's like, well, this is something that I need to start to cultivate and incorporate. And so yeah, it's been a regular Sabbath meal company thing because it's something I've come to value, and I came to value. I learned that from them, and uh, so it is something about, there's something about, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Well, how are we keeping it holy? The idea of if we're elevating it above the rest of the week, if we're, making it special, how do we make it special? And so it talks in Isaiah 58, like, when you'll be exalted. It's like one of the things is like when you make my Sabbath your delight, So to elevate the Sabbath in these ways is a way I think of keeping it separate and holy. And it's like I had heard at some point that whether it's a Catholic church, I forget, but there's at some point where they said, Saturday is the day for fasting. The Sabbath day is a fast day, and then Sunday, the day of our Lord, is when you're supposed to, that's when you're supposed to feast. It's like, okay, well, it's a man-made commandment, and it's an interruption of that which was established. It's like, well, was how was Messiah observing Sabbath? This whole Sabbath is not for man, man for Sabbath. People will spout that off awfully quick, but it's like, well, how is it that we make such negative reference to something which God meant for our good? So it's like you are here to that the fact that it's made for us, it doesn't mean that it's made for us so that we can just ignore it. It's made for us there's blessing in it. So for us to think otherwise is wrong. But
Okay, so you you actually invite people in? You do all
yep,
that?
yep,
Wow. That's incredible.
it's delicious.
It's delicious. So do you make that chicken for your guests?
I have landlady chicken.
Yeah,
I have, yeah,
that's cool. That's very
yep,
cool. When you were in Israel, did you go to the area where Jesus was on the cross?
kind of.
What was
Um,
that like?
well, I heard it that put this way. There was an Australian missionary who would spend most of his time was it in the Philippines? He was India, Jakarta, and he would say, I was touring when I was in my Hebrew classes with him. You spent some time touring with him, and when we were in the old city, he says, "Ah, Jerusalem, bells, smells, incense, and nonsense." Um, speaking of, and the very first time that I was, being, led, uh, kind of the nose ring in the tour, the way that you're towed along is in the tourist rope, in Jerusalem. I remember the tour guide talking about the Stations of the Cross, and it's like this is where Jesus put his hand on the wall because he couldn't, and the wall is like all grungy because everybody's touched it. It's just disgusting. And I'm like, I'm not touching that. But a lot of people will touch it and then kiss their hand and stuff like that. It's kind of creepy, all that. But so Jerusalem had been like, destroyed and rebuilt some like 39 times or something in the course of history. So you get into the whole what was there, when was it there? I've heard of Jerusalem is described as Disneyland for religious people. And so, there's a lot of truth there, but there's also equal amount of, lore and fables and all sorts of stuff. So, getting into the Garden Tomb location and all that. So, where these things really were, it's subject to debate, and you hear different people. A lot of times they talk a good game, and uh, it's it's something that as I understand, Golgotha is not a known place. Now, Golgotha, it comes Galgalit in Hebrew, the Gilgal, and so the first place they set up the tabernacle is what? Gilgal. It's the place of the skull, and the idea of a mound. The word igloo, you can hear the gull, igloo. It's a dome type thing. So it's another how would I say a wink and a nod to what the tabernacle was at Gull. It's the mound. And so this idea of the place of the skull, place of the mound, is it fitting that they named it that, or the idea of wheels, arguably? So this is where again, near where they crossed the Jordan. Um, so yeah, there's a lot of religious folklore in the place, and being able to just parse out what's true or part true, and a lot of people with a lot of really weird religious appetites is, There's that episode of The Simpsons where Homer thought he was Messiah for a while, right? They
I
call
did.
it this Messiah complex. So
I didn't. I never saw that one, but I people are very. That makes sense. It's
but
deception,
but
right?
but you're also moved by it because when you're there, it's something different, and you can feel it, you can sense it. I
That's what I
swear
was going to ask.
the sun is hotter there. It's amazing. It can be, 90 degrees here and 90 degrees there, and there it just seems more intense. And maybe it's because all that white stone. I don't know, but there is something very special about the land and captivating, and the number of people who go there and are changed. So that whole Homer Simpson thing where he after he was there, he thought he was Messiah. So not to say that that is a proper response or whatever, but that complex that the underlying truth to that joke is that people are changed when they go there, or they can be changed when they go there. And it is really an inspirational thing. You can't open your Bible and look at it the same. You can't as far as looking at the people too. There's a lot of people who think a lot of bad things about Jews, and all those people, it's like you've never actually been to Israel. You've never experienced it. They just want to, they see the Jews through the lens of the way some people interpret the gospel message, or let me say the gospel remarks about them. Oh, they're all a bunch of Pharisees. And it's like, oh, is that the case? It's like, no, well, Jesus was a Jew, so you need to dial it down a notch.
Yeah.
Um, and so this anti-Semitic there's an anti-Semitic bent within a lot of religious people in this, and it's a lot of it's unbalanced, it's unfounded, and it's misappropriated, and they haven't experienced them. I really before going to Israel, the number of Jews that I met, I could count on one hand, and that's the reality for a lot of Americans, or heavily churched Americans, or whatever. So for them to experience it. They speak of something that they know nothing about, and not understanding the reach and the scope of this diaspora, these people who returned. This and you don't get an appreciation for that until you start walking the neighborhoods. And it's like, well, here's Hungarian Jews, and here's some Russian Jews, and here's some Jews. It's like they seem more like they're Latin American, because there's a lot of Latin American. You get into the Sephardic. So the Sephardic, had to do with Spain. And so Spanish Inquisition, people fled Spain, and a lot of them, starting to flee to the Americas. And you have all the last name. There's a video I saw once, or a teaching I saw once, talking about the Judah Tamar prophecy. It talks about Judah and Tamar. He had his former daughter-in-law, and thought she was a prostitute, and that's how the line of Judah came to be. So it's talking about how the two forks, between the Sephardic and the Ashkenazi. But speaking of how this was within the Sephardic people, and the Sephardic being how would I say, um, getting into the Spanish Hispanic origin, right? So you have in Mexico all these names like Rodriguez and Martinez and Lopez. That "ez" at the end is I understand, is coming from Eretz Zion. And so when the Spanish Inquisition started happening, they converted to Catholicism, but maintained that Eretz Zion in their name, so that they could identify or cross-identify. So you start listening to the amount of Latin American countries that have adopted various Jewish customs. So there are literally a lot of Jewish descent in places like this, and going all the way into South America. So there are now you see, like, well, I shouldn't say now. I haven't been to Israel since 2016, but I end up seeing a lot of like Brazilian, a lot of South American influence, as it seems like they were opening the doors more for South Americans to make Aliyah, etc. So it's just ethnically, it's just it's a very diverse place because of that, and again, the people who want to just say they're all, none of them are real Jews and stuff like that. I think they're not. I think they're speaking from emotional preferences is what I'd say. So,
That was nice. I was like ignorance. That was
you know,
my
you have
thought.
that's when you come into it. You would be ignorant. It's like, well, why would you know? It's like if you spend time with them, getting into like a Jewish Sabbath service or whatever. It's like, hey, who are you? Where are you from? And it's the same way of church crashing in that sense. But they're curious of like, oh, why do you think? Because they don't. It's part of their doctrine, if you will, to not evangelize, and part of it is because like, well, whenever they reach out to Christians, they get their hands slammed in the drawer, and so they're gun shy, with a lot. They're xenophobic, and they've seen, how many cultures, there's the Russian, the pogroms and the other, uh, all the camps, the World War II, and you're seeing the anti-Semitism on the rise again. Whether New York, just real random stuff, and again all the Gaza people, and so this is starting to light a match in the world, and what is it? What's at the root of it? And it's the idea of the battle of the seed. I think you have the notion of uh, enmity between you and the woman, her seed and your seed, and that theme going to the idea of the wheat and the tares and how it works its way forward and backwards. The fact that these are quote chosen people. There's people who just don't like that. They're jealous of it. They become unhinged with it, and so not to say, again, I'm not trying to say that all Israel does is all top notch right, because there's just a lot of, some of it's propaganda, but some of it's rooted in fear of, that it's a really real fear from in being persecuted. It's like they can remember, which of them have no more grandparents because, the Holocaust or whatever. You start seeing these people with tattoos on their arms, and you don't see a lot of them anymore, obviously, because they're so old at this point. But to not to just pretend that wasn't real is not, it's not a practical, and it's not a very academically honest viewpoint. So. But if we don't see that, how are we to experience them if we don't, in a sense, reach out? And because they're in this extreme minority and they get picked on. So on one hand, you have Hollywood and Washington D.C. So there's a
That's
lot of corruption.
exactly. You knew exactly. I was
Yeah.
just going there. Like, what do you do with all that corruption? Because I think here in the States would be different than there.
It is very different in a lot of ways, because those, like the American Jews that move there, a lot of them have done it for principle, and because they realize some of it realize that it's like, this is kind of we're God's chosen people. This is the chosen land. We belong here. Some of them have been, of that persuasion, and that's what's inspired that move. Others, it's an increase in standard of living, like it was when the Iron Curtain fell. Russia, it's like, they were like anything to get out of Russia. So
Right.
a lot of those people, they say, weren't even Jews that came, in that flood of immigration. So, but what do we experience in the States? Well, if they're all comfortable here, and it's within synagogues, I'm sure you have a certain good old boys club. It's mutual back scratching. It's, in a sense, it's no different than the Amish, or it's like there's favoritism, there's collusion and bullying and all sorts of things that happen at a lot of different levels, whether it's secret societies and all that. So it's kind of on par with a bunch of that. But in this case, there's like New Testament text talks about what, do good to all people, but especially the believers. So to give believers preferential treatment, it's like, well, that's biblical, and it's like it talks about the family, kind of the family first. Kinsman redeemer. You're supposed to redeem If there's some knucklehead within your family, then it's a family member responsibility instead of just, no, we're going to let them fall on the rest of society. It's kind of like, well, how do we own this? So it's like my brother's keeper thing is the really root notion virtue behind that. I would argue so.
Okay, here's a question. Over over in Israel, I feel like they have purposely broken the family down in the sense that we're not living generations together anymore. And I'm not saying we have to be in the same house, but they have separated people from towns to different states. And I think that that has helped tear the family down and make it easy to give up on people and not worry. So is it like that over there too? Or do they have generations still together? Or have they done that to all of us?
Well, within Orthodoxy, there seems to be a lot of retention, and there's a lot of non-religious who are starting to join Orthodoxy, kind of in a finding God movement, and the connection, and there's a lot of people who leave Christendom and say, well, you know what, I'm going to join up with these people because at least there's a culture, there's a that's a very attractive element. There's a cohesiveness in the culture, and there's a certain order to it. But to the point of getting into what's biblical, there's the idea of jubilee, right? So the idea of jubilee was to return the land to its original owners,
Hmm.
and that idea of return the land to its original owners, that is definitely a generational thing, but it's also a family gathering thing, right? Because if all the families have dispersed and gone here and gone there, at the end of
Yes.
time, and this is the Jubilee thing. So you have Messiah standing up in the synagogue. It's like, I'm declaring the land, the year of Jubilee, and to set the captives free. You get back into that freedom thing and that whole structure. So, as I understand, a lot of the land in Israel, I've heard that it's run by Russian mafia. This is one thing I've heard, but getting into how they go about leasing the land out, instead of they did that as I understand, some sort of protective measure, but you're supposed to have sovereign owners of land, and that's a problem. That's a problem here in the States, and it's a problem there because what happens if you don't have a jubilee? You have monopoly, and once you have the monopoly, then nobody's ever free because everyone's a serf on someone's land.
Yeah.
And this is really, and people say, well, America was raised on Christian principles. Well, how about jubilee? No, we don't have that. Well, this is something then the Almighty gets involved in, and he says, you know what? Crunch, crunch, crunch. I'm gonna
Hmm.
I'm gonna crush your system. I'm gonna bring it to its knees, and I'm gonna proclaim liberty for the captives. Where the eclipse is going over is supposed to be the triangle of human trafficking. So we've devolved to that point in this country, and you know, it's the Jonah time right now. It's the 40 days of teshuvah, of repentance, and we have to think seriously about between what we've done and where we're going. And that was the story of Jonah, or 40 days, and you got that to clean up your act. So we're in the midst of that period right now, I believe. But
100%. And go cliche, dark to light. It just seems like everything, whether it's personal, whether it's in the public, however it's going, things are coming to light. Like revelation. I am not going a day without at least two or three revelations. Like truly just God just showing me things. It's really, personal growing, all that good stuff. But and seeing it outward too. I think this is an exciting time. Now, I have a question. When
just one.
Jesus, well, no, okay, for right now. When Jesus, okay, I'm talking out of not knowing, okay? So just be patient with me because it's a real question. When he was being crucified, was that also a time of jubilee? And that is one of the reasons why they want it crucified because then if it's Jubilee, that means the government loses their money and everyone goes back to.
Well, it's not in that case. It would have been like an exclusive government thing because they had a Roman governance kind of going above and beyond them, but they would have still had some sort of land thing. So on one hand, you had a sovereignty issue with respect to the people, but that there's the freeing of the slaves that's also tied into Jubilee. So you've got the slaves were freed as well as the land is freed. So you had Shemitah cycles were 1 year and seven, and then at the end of seven Shemitah cycles there was the Jubilee. And some would argue it's like year 49. Others argue it'd be like year 50. And I'm not here to push one view or the other, but that's when the land was restored. So it'd be kind of like a once in a lifetime thing. So maybe you were born into slavery because your parents hadn't done well, or maybe they got hit with famine, etc. Now they say that ministry Messiah was 3 years, 3 year period. So if he's there, proclaiming the year of Jubilee, how close is that in proximity to his crucifixion and resurrection, etc. And then there's also or is that a different thing as far as setting the captives free? So was that a both and? And some people have argued, you fast forward, on a 33-year cycle, or you're getting into 30 AD, or whenever it was, is that when that echo of the Jubilee is taking place? There's some, I think, like Mark Biltz's was saying that's a 2024 thing he believes, I think is. So others, in 67 and in 2017, we had what seemed to be, Jubilee-like events, but then 2017, we didn't have that in the same degree, although we had the eclipse. We had that other eclipse, the first of that eclipse set. So is that pointing to Jubilee? So between Jubilee and Shemitah, I don't know. But I hadn't considered that, the land Jubilee at the time of Messiah and setting the captives free. That is an interesting thing. I would have to ponder on that. And, again, there's a lot of different viewpoints on these elements of calendar.
Yeah.
And, I want to say between, I mean, the spectrums are very wide, but a lot of people are getting back into studying the biblical calendar again, and also not just studying it but observing it.
It's
And that's a
true.
good thing.
Yes.
This tabernacle is actually the Ohel Moed, and so that's basically they translate it as tent of meeting, but it's really the idea of tent of appointment or appointed times. And so this idea of the appointed times, the feasts were called Moed, the Moedim in the plural. And so if your feasts were for the tabernacle, the tabernacle or the Ohel Moed is mentioned 2 times more than the feasts or the holidays. And so from a importance standpoint, and when they came out of Egypt, there's no reference to them between the Passover and the building of this Ohel Moed, the tabernacle, the tent of meeting. There's no record of them having a festival in that period of time without it. So people are like, who are trying to keep the feast again are like, oh, what are we doing here? Well, part of the reason everyone's kind of fumbling around, in my opinion, is because we don't have this.
Yeah.
I believe this is part of it as far as the project. Project 314 is about tabernacle research and restoration. So I have models that I've got like a tabletop model that I don't know if Robert showed you that
Yes, it's
picture.
beautiful. It's
Um,
beautiful.
and so I'm working on like a six scale / quarter scale right now. Where it's another when I say proof of concept, that would be mobile, that you could actually get people mobilized in, or when I say mobilized in, where you could get people experiencing as far as walk inside and look around and see all the parts and see how it all lines up with the Bible. That's something that you can't do with those other shoebox models, things like this thing. You go to Eilat in Israel or in Ariel, they had a Jewish model there versus the one in Eilat, Timnah Park. It was basically made by Germans and ironically, and that's a Christian run by Christian organization, and you start to see what they represent, and it's like, it says to use wooden bars, and what do? They use metal. It says use metal bases, and or sockets, or as they translate, they use wood ones. It's like, so they can't build the thing to spec, and there's a reason for it because their design is dumb. It's like it's that simple. It's ridiculous, and it got carried over, but it's been misrepresented since the time of Josephus this way. So that's time of Messiah.
Have you
And
been into an actual?
yep, two of them. The both the one in the shoebox model, as I affectionately call it. I was in that one in because tell me that this thing here. Oops. Tell me that this thing here doesn't kind of resemble a shoebox with a
Totally.
something draped over it, right? So yeah,
Absolutely.
that's me and my mockery. But with respect to what that is, there the shoebox factor is it doesn't work from the standpoint of engineering. It doesn't work as far as matching the text, and people have just kind of come to accept it. And so being able to show people this in real life, it means something. So I'm trying to, facilitate that. So, my website, you guys can check out my website, but I've got a donate button on there. And so, people want to support the project, supporting this build. I'm working with other team members to do more combination of outreach and research and all that, which so we have a lot going on right now, and more interviews up and coming, and just trying to get the people to understand that God's don't put God in a box. God's home is a dome.
I like that. Just going to show everybody your website. This is and then let me put the. Give me 1 second while I give everybody.
But there's no coffee available on my website. You have to understand that.
I give you guys permission to go there anyway. I'm just kidding. That's okay. That's okay. Products. You know what? You need to get coffee.
I won't forbid it, but so if you want to read the book while drinking coffee, it's not forbidden.
Okay, that's
I
good.
try to be flexible.
Look at that, you
So
guys.
that's my book. I go through it's the House of El Shaddai. So El Shaddai is one of the names for God. It's in their name Amy Grant song. El Shaddai, El Shaddai. So
Yeah.
Shaddai in Hebrew is Shin Dalet Yud, as far as how you spell it, which is the Shin is worth three, or like 300. The Dalet is like our letter D, like the fourth letter of the alphabet, and then Yud is the 10th letter. So when you add that together, it's 314. So El Shaddai is the God of high. Um,
Wow.
so that's why I call it the House of El Shaddai. It's never called that in the Bible, but I thought it was fitting.
It is
Um,
fitting.
so getting into the House of El Shaddai, Exodus Tabernacle Reconsidered, and so I'm putting these two systems next to each other so you can make comparisons for yourself. And I'm doing this with the English text even. And it's like, what makes more sense? Does this make more sense, or does that make more sense? And so I give them this so that they're given context. And so I'm saying, no, those parts don't belong there; they belong here. And that whole thing, I have there's more than 200 pictures in there showing how it would transition, and showing other ancient religious art, and like a lot of CGI pictures showing how this transition takes place. So that's what's in that House of El Shaddai book. If you scroll upward a little bit, yeah. So I've got a webinar series recorded right now. It's a 7-part series, going for probably on average a couple hours per each of the presentations I do. I go through through two of them where I'm talking about the actual structure itself, so you understand, from Exodus 26 and 27 what you're looking at. But then I get into anatomical things. So like, how does this relate to the human body? And there's a lot of different ways that it's all there. And then I get into the priest and the priest garments, how that's been misinterpreted as well, and how the tabernacle's a lot of key to understanding that, as well as the tribal encampments. You have also, let's see, um, week five, or the fifth session I'm doing, gets into the Christology. So there's a lot of Christology in this round record or round system as well. We have as well as getting into some of the Jewish esoteric stuff. So, you can start making sense then between gospel stuff and stuff that's, traditional in Judaism that we wouldn't think twice about or make any sense out of. But the tabernacle is the key for congealing these things, getting them all coming together. And then apart from that, there is, let's see, I do one on sacrifice, Old Testament sacrifice, as it's come to be known, and getting that, getting into the real purpose of why they did that, um, or why the Bible commands that to be done, I should say. Um, and then there's also the last session. I'm getting into the altar, the design of the altar. So this copper altar here, um, it's designed in a certain way. It's everyone thinks it's also a box, and it's not, because it says, oh, they say it says in the Bible, it says four square. It's rabua in Hebrew, and that it's really the Hebrew word arba is four, and it speaks of something that is, in this case, it's quartered. It's four parted or four legged in that sense
Ah,
too. And so everyone's just they look at some of these little excerpts in the Bible and they say, oh, the courtyard, it's 50 by 100. And that's why they just, settle for the crazy shoebox. It's like, look, it's 50 by 100 and everyone thinks that. Yeah, well, everyone's wrong. I'm sorry. Um, because they don't understand the words, they don't understand the reference points. So that's my webinar set in a nutshell on that products page.
wow.
So I go into, a fair amount of detail on all that. So
Which is good.
lots of slides, etc. I got a workbook right there. Um, I have, let's see, that's a soft cover version. I've got PowerPoint. Right now, we're in the process of revamping this PowerPoint to basically a web-based application. I'll be having hopefully a website re-release here in the next few weeks. And then we got
Wow.
the drawings, laminated drawing set. Dave from Flyover Conservatives, talking to him about, he says he's using them for placemats for his kids or whatever. Or grandkids, I forget.
Oh, that's
But that
cool.
those are they go page by page. The whole exegesis boils down to 4 pages. So if you don't want to read a book, don't. The problems with my book is I'm comparing. I have to spend a lot of energy comparing this thing to this, and those drawings. I cover this in 4 pages. Because it can be that condensed, because the Bible is that concise and clear. So if you roll down a little farther, keep going, there we go. My model kit. So that's the one that Robert's built. I've got some other photos again. That's I'm looking to replace that, but that's a build yourself type thing, and that's dare I say, fun for the whole family, or if you're in a study group, whether it's a Sabbath thing or a Sunday thing, whichever, you can go through and follow the Bible text. And, it's almost part for part. There's certain things I can't scale down to 1/75th of their size, but you can build this on a kitchen table,
Wow.
is the point. So the base is like 38 inches in diameter, and it's something that you could do, in an afternoon or something like that if you commit yourself to finishing it and follow the instructions. And so that's a more recent, product that we've been working on for a while. When I say we, I've got a friend, Bethany in Michigan. Shout out to Bethany. And Robert right now is helping me rephoto that, and get some other people working on the marketing side of that. So we're hoping to get that, front and center into people's living rooms and stuff, because when you build it, you understand it in a different way. It's different than reading the book. It's a much higher level of understanding you get. You're like, oh, I understand why those are there. I understand why there's 20 of those and there's 4 of those, and et cetera, et cetera. It all comes together then, and it becomes the no-brainer.
This is the other page. I don't know why it's not loading.
Hit F5
Oh,
unless you have a Mac. I don't know about the Macs, but
I don't have a Mac. Oh, there we go.
there you go.
Look at that. Thank you.
Yep. You like
I
F5. F5 is a great key.
I've never even okay.
Refresh your
Look,
browser. Yep.
nice. Let me put these links everywhere. Oh, I did. Okay. Wow.
So yeah, on the right hand side there, you got I'm morphing the shoebox into the dome, which is what this whole thing is about. It's
Yeah.
obviously it doesn't stretch and morph out quite that way, but on the left right now, I still have got a just a introductory thing. A lot of it's introducing the broken shoebox model, so everyone thinks that that's cool and it works. You should give that a listen and think twice before you're accepting the party line, so to speak. So
Yeah. Wow. This is incredible. One of the things that I thought of, um, here, I'll come back to you. You guys check it out. If you can help. Follow wherever you can, because all that matters to help get the word out. This is absolutely incredible. Now, one of the things I thought of is you were saying how the rails are supposed to be made of wood. And I mean, that makes total sense. Do you like the whole grounding thing? Because I believe like our earth is very much alive, right? And I feel like God is in it. And so the wood is connecting. It's like if we're holding on to the guardrail, we're still connecting.
um, I've seen grounding studies done before where there's this video. It's actually called Grounded, and they're showing um, 2 vases of water with 2 flowers in. And one of them, they actually take a ground wire, a copper ground wire, and plug it into the earth ground. And the other one, they don't. And the one with the copper wire going into the earth ground lives like 3 times longer as a flower, as a cut flower. Okay, so there's a lot of it sounds like people who want to worship crystals and do new age type stuff. It's like there's physics behind it, like it or not. There's physics in it, and so yeah, is this structure designed is in part as a grounding thing? Yes, it is. So
It is.
yeah,
Which, I mean, isn't that just so God? Like,
sure.
as you get, I mean, I think it's, I think he's sweet. It's another way where he shows us we're covered. And it's another way to be in touch with him, you know?
Sure.
Which listen, you brought up movies. Avatar is what really started to wake me up to who God was, just because they would step and the earth would, their planet would light up. And I'm like, this, like, yeah, like that makes sense to who God, because he made it, right? He's life and he is love, and it's beautiful. So it makes total sense to me.
Yeah, they have there's no shortage of disturbing of biblical inversions in that, right?
Yeah.
So at the end, the tree of life is destroyed, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil remains.
Mm. Wow. I'm
There,
actually talking to someone that gets it. Yes.
there's a
Yes.
lot of inversion. So, the guy, flying the dragon, riding the beast,
Hmm.
is the savior, at the he's also this half man, half, you know,
Beast.
yeah, alien guy, So
Oh,
if you start listening to a lot of alien abduction stories, they look a lot like the Na'vi, in that movie. And so Na'vi'im in Hebrew is the word for prophet. And so they're trying to pitch these people as if they're prophets when they're not. So They show the pity thing on like, okay, here's man and all of his evil, and he's here to just destroy everything. So
Oh,
it's back into this whole, tell the truth while you invert it and hope that people follow, take the bad one in. So
and this is why it's imperative that we actually be in the scripture so that we can be aware and be able to put these connections together.
do not be deceived.
Do not be deceived. And Satan, he's a master deceiver.
It's a good movie director too.
Yes. Yes. And conductor,
Yeah,
as far as music and stuff too.
sure.
Because that, like, right now, I feel like politics and entertainment, it's the same thing. Like, they're the same people running it all, which their conductor would be Satan, right? Because all of that. So it's very interesting to see as I have always thought Banners for Freedom going around the Remnant tour, it's about repentance. It's about the believers repenting and let's get it straight. And it's interesting to see how I'm saying we, because we're beginning to acknowledge, we're learning, we're finding out about what God would really have, right? The Hebrew calendar versus what they're doing. So we are winning. I feel like we
Absolutely.
are.
Yep.
Now,
The book doesn't turn out good for them.
yeah, it does not. Like, you guys are having fun now, but just wait. As my mom always says, your comings up will be coming. You'll be getting your comings up. Now, the question is, this it's called a tabernacle, correct? I just want to have the right name.
Well, that's the popular English translation. That comes from Latin. The taberna is the root, the Latin root. It's where
Okay.
we happen to get our English word tavern from.
I mean,
So
that's again deceit, right?
it's a bit more confusion, but yeah, it that refers to like a temporary dwelling place type thing. Like it's what they'll translate from tent also. So sometimes when you read the word Feast of Tabernacles, there's three words that they'll translate. One is Sukkah, so it's the festival of Sukkot. Sukkot is plural, which is the festival of, sometimes they'll describe as the festival of booths. Well, in my world, the only booth you ever step into is a phone booth, and they've taken most of those out now. So
That's true.
it's not a TARDIS, okay, for the people who are into the Whovian types or whatever. But um, so for too much sci-fi there. But the let's see, uh, so booths is one, a different way of translating that from Sukkot. But tents, feast of tents or tabernacles. So tabernacle though is usually used in a more particular sense. And the other word is ohel, and that's ohel moed, which is tent of meeting. Okay, so and then you also have got mishkan in Hebrew, and you've heard the term Shekinah, the Shekinah glory, as some people will say. So shekan is where we get our English word skin from. And guess what this is made of? It's made of skins. So
What
let's
skins?
see what lives in our English. We have things living in it, but they're all broken.
Okay. So what is the proper pronunciation?
Mishkan is
Mishkan.
that Mishkan.
Will we be building this in our country? Will we have one? Or should they be in every state? I mean, shouldn't they be everywhere?
Well, I think as a good to do thing, it's like, well, if it's in the Bible, is it not good to do? Um, that's a part truth. So getting into the issue of the why it's for, getting into the prophetic side. So, no one has a tabernacle on their radar to speak of because they're all looking for the third temple and so forth and so on. But the book of Ezekiel talks about how the a time where Judah and Ephraim are back in Israel and the Mishkan is above them, or it sounds like it is surrounding them, or when I say above them. You get the surrounding kind of in both ways. That the whole thing also, it's in my midst. Have them make a tabernacle so that I may dwell in their midst. This is the commandment that's given. We have churches where we go into the churches or the synagogues or whatever. And synagogue, ironically, is a Greek word that's applied to a Jewish gathering place. So it's kind of ironic there. But synagogue is the Greek on that, I think. But the let's see, the church structure, both of those things are, including it's all made for human creature comfort. Give me a better pew and all that. It's like this was a house for him so that he could dwell in it, so that he could. And this is where there's a lot of replacement theology saying, well, now because Messiah came, we wouldn't need this anymore. Solomon decommissioned it. I think that was a mistake in that he was never given commands to tear it down. At least none that I'm aware of. And so this expectation that it doesn't exist into the future is another thing that kind of keeps us off their radars, because no one's expecting, it's the third temple. It's not the second tabernacle that they're looking towards. So, and the allusion in Ezekiel is kind of, it's a small reference. There's also the story about, Amos 9:11. In those days, I will restore David's fallen tent. Well, that happens to be, in some places it's translated as tabernacle, but it's really the root there is sukkah in Hebrew. So you could also argue that this is sukkah from a etymology standpoint, etc. And so is it also making reference to this? There's a certain amount of subjective prophecy, prophetic interpretation that, to answer that question of yours. And so I'm of the view that we were commanded to build it, and I don't see where that command has been rescinded. So that happens to be, again, my viewpoint on it, which is kind of a not so ordinary, viewpoint. But part of this, it's like, well, what does this do? You tell me that, for the Noah's Ark thing. So you got Ken Ham, putting up they spent $100 million on a boat that won't float for a flood that won't happen. When I say but it's a testimony. That's the thing with that. That's a testimony. Guess what? To rebuild this, that would be a testimony. This would be a testimony to our religious folly. There's in the book of Ezekiel, I'm going to say chapter 43, it talks about showing, measure out the pattern so you may show the people their sins. And it's like, you thought it was this, this is offensive. This is what's the truth, and so for people to come and realize, well, what if the rest of what I've learned in Bible school isn't quite on par, right? That is, I think, the message in part of this tabernacle. Saying you guys really don't have it all together. You think you do. Think
Yeah.
about how many seminaries have missed this over the years,
I have thought it's all been intentional, because why, when I was growing up, a pastor could just be a pastor of a church. Well, now you've got to have your degree. And isn't that interesting? Because you have to go to school. What do they do in schools? Indoctrinate. So they're telling everybody how the stories go. They're telling you how your spirit's going to, it's another controlled avenue. So,
controlled narrative. Yeah.
yeah. So it's like, come on, listen. And again, we're talking ego. Your ego is in the way when you're sitting here saying, like, there's no way my God would allow me to be deceived. I mean, hello. Have we not heard about Lucifer yet in the garden? I always think of stuff like that. Like come on. They had the narrative that church and state are supposed to be separate. They nailed that into older generations, and then they taught us that. Why?
Yeah.
So we have to understand, like, there's a whole, and people believed it was biblical. Oh, it's in the Bible.
Yeah, that separation of church and state thing is really it's really a misnomer. It's really misrepresented and all that. Um, it's really, to speak in terms of government without morality is just dumb, because then what authority is there to do what and how?
Hmm.
So nobody wants theocracy as part of the reality, because they like democracy, this whole idea that man is again the measure of all things. And like I've heard it put this way, and this was 20 years ago I heard this, probably maybe more. So there's more laws, anti-gun laws in the books in California than the whole New Testament of the English Bible, the King James Bible. So there's more laws that we have pertaining to guns. And it's like, okay, well, what part of thou shalt not kill wasn't good enough for you, right? It's like, well, we got to start blaming the guns, locking down on the guns, because otherwise someone might kill someone. It's like, well, so what do we do when someone kills someone? Well, do we hold them accountable in a way that no, we don't. And so it talks about, punishment according to the law. It says so that this will purge the evil from among you. And if we don't do that, it's not the government's place to forgive. The government is there is the vehicle by which we punish. Individuals can forgive. Government is not called to forgive. Government is ordained to enforce justice. And so government without justice, and it goes back to the morality side of things. What moral inclination do people have, and why? And so, people don't want to live according to, Bible ideas is the problem. So,
So much perversion of it all. And that's what we're in America right now. It's really, it's to me, it is out of control. They're mutating our children. People are actually mutating themselves. That is such deception. You know, it's, it's, I don't know, it's wild.
it's
Okay,
true.
are there plans to build right now in our country one of those?
When you say one of those,
Because I want to say the right word, but I can't remember it. The tabernacle, the proper tabernacle, which is actually inviting. It looks like a nice place to go in. It
right,
has a visual impact.
yeah, right now, my short term ambition is to make a 1/6 and 1/4 scale. I would like to see a full scale built. Now, whether or not enough other fellow Americans, fellow believers, I shouldn't even say Americans, because I don't care if they're from Mexico, El Salvador, dare I say Ukraine on the brain, um, from Nigeria, whatever, from
Yeah.
Pakistan. There's getting into the whole house of prayer for all nations was one of the responses that Solomon, um, it tied into Solomon's prayer, basically. Declare this as a house for all nations, is um, New Testament quote, but kind of referring back then. And even the Jews understand that the temple was really, it wasn't just for them and all about them. And so I really don't want to get into, definitely political nationalities on that. And then
Right.
there's also the ethnic side as well. But this was a commandment that was given to Israel. And so I believe that commandment was not rescinded. And to build the scale models first for the sake of raising awareness and arguably possibly touring. That's what I would like to be able to do. And right now I'm renting a shop, so I am in the process of setting up tooling to be, cutting poles to various lengths and shaping them in this way and that way. And so builds are underway right now. When I say builds in the plural, I've got one 1/25th scale in the shop as well, but I've been shifting into the setup for the bigger model. So we're looking at those between 30 and 50 feet in diameter, roughly.
Wow.
Um, so that's bigger, but that's still small compared to the original. So
Wow.
so
Wow.
the original would be as tall as Ken Ham's Ark exhibit in Kentucky,
Wow.
and yeah.
And you're in Wisconsin, so I'm assuming you're building in Wisconsin, which isn't far from me.
Well, to say that it would be built in Wisconsin is very dare I say premature. A full scale one would not, but yeah, the quarter scale I would, and whether just because I build it here doesn't mean I would set it up here or exclusively here. I would
Okay.
probably do dry run setups in Wisconsin, but the question is where does it belong? By nature, it's a touring thing. And so it kind of needs to hit the road at some point, is part of the point because getting into, taking it to people for the sake of education is
That's
that's
yes.
part of the I would say my vision on some of this. It's can't say I heard of thus saith the Lord thundering down at me like that, but this is what I'm I guess compelled to believe to do because I see the merit in it. Maybe in 2 years time, if I were to finish that in that way, or a year's time, hopefully in less than 6 months time, um, then to set it up and have it stationary at a place, that's another option. I cannot that definitively speak to its future any more than I can speak to my future in that. But right now, this is the path that I'm on and feel compelled to, and it's my story, and I'm sticking to it, at least
Well,
for
I
now.
like it. I like this story. This is good. Thank you. I'm
Very
glad
good.
that I'm so grateful. One of the things that I thought of, I do a show on Saturday mornings with Duppy Dives, and he does the bloodlines. And he's an oil guy. He is a geologist. I hope I'm saying it right. And he too lost his job, right? Because the industry, so things are changing. So this has given him the opportunity. And it seems how God is, at first, it seems insane. Like, why is this happening? What am I going to do? And then when he brings you to this path, this is such an important path. This is eye opening. This is an opportunity. It's life changing. So what seems difficult at the moment or to hear and to see what God is doing is amazing. It
Amen.
really is. Thank you. I'm so grateful. All right, listen.
Welcome.
It's 10:40.
Okay.
Honestly, I could keep going. I mean, you're a good conversation. Will you come back?
I would love to.
That's awesome. All right, let's do a thank you real quick because we got diamonds from It's Me Marcy. Yes, artist said Andrew is a very interesting guy. I'm telling you, and I'm gonna rewatch this show too because I know that there's so many nooks and crannies. I can't wait. See, we'll have to do it again because I'm like, all right. But sometimes my processor runs a little slow. Yeah, I enjoyed this so much.
We've covered a lot of ground, to be honest. So
Yes, yes,
I didn't
and
ex I didn't expect to be hiking that far in that many directions, but that's fine.
this is conversation. This is
It
good.
is.
I
It's
love it.
it's coffee talk where we talk about dogs and coffee, right?
Yes, absolutely.
As
Absolutely.
as long as you don't start going all verklempt, we'll be fine. I actually started investigating the etymology of verklempt before I came on, so
Oh, do tell.
it's kind of inconclusive, but um, let's see, parkalamet is it's really a German Yiddish origins. And
Really?
so anything Yiddish is usually, Hebrew rooted. And so par, the idea of par, you have the idea or is in there, which is the idea of light, but the pei again, the idea of the mouth or lip, and then kala is like hanging. So, it's really conveying the idea of emotionally choked up in the, as we know it from Mike Myers, and that was undoubtedly to mimic someone's Jewish grandmother or something like that.
Yeah.
But that's a Yiddish term, so the fact that that carried over from Germany into New York at some point was no doubt what happened. But I was it's really for me to say that usually you can kind of decode the Hebrew as far as what it really is, how it's coming out of Hebrew. And I couldn't quite do it. I was like, well, I think that would be a stretch if I said this and that and the other thing. But kalab, it means to like hang. It's or like a sling type thing. And then the MT at the end, mem and tet. That's how they were spelling it. Although it gets into this, if this is slang that they brought up, it could be mem and tav, because the tav is the last letter, and that's like mut is the idea of death. So this idea of kind of hung up, or like where your light, your mouth, your light is hung and dead. Kind of like choked up is I don't know. It's kind of a I'm not thoroughly tied into Yiddish etymology, but that's where I would start guessing that way it's pronounced and spelled in Hebrew anyway. So
Can I just say how happy I am that you even did that and that you get it? I feel like you got it. There are many people
yeah,
that don't get it. And like,
I'm
he
just
got it.
I'm just dating myself at this point at that, but
Ourselves.
yeah,
Ourselves.
yeah.
That's just, oh, I've,
Dogs
I,
and dogs and coffee.
dogs and coffee. It's
Dogs and
true.
coffee.
I'm originally from Jersey. So when
Okay.
you're talking about New York too, like growing up, we're always in New York City.
Hmm.
And really, it is a total melting pot of so many different, And I will tell you, all of our diners, they're all Greek. I don't know if they still are, but they were. So that is how I got introduced to Greek food, you know.
Okay. New York is definitely the best, as far as I've experienced, the best food variety in the entire world. I mean, I think no one can hold a candle to what New York at one point at least had to offer. I can't.
I
Last
know.
I was there was literally 20 years ago, but
Me too.
and 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 at that point, the hamburger at TGI Fridays was at Applebee's. I think it was TGI Fridays, was $16. I can only imagine what it costs now.
Oh, wow.
That was then. That was 20 years ago. $16 hamburger on the menu. That was
Wow.
maybe it was a cheeseburger, so that would have been, more value with the cheese added, of course.
Of
So
course.
higher price, justify that higher price. So
Like, how dare you not say cheese? Okay, since you're in Wisconsin and it's cheese, what is your favorite cheese?
um boy, that's a rough question because as far as Wisconsin cheeses, California is actually a bigger dairy state and more cheese. But all that stuff that they make with Kraft, they're making all the Kraft junk. All the apparently the Wisconsin cheeses are all more small batch. When I say gourmet-ish, they're more whether it's aged cheddars and stuff like that. I'm let's see, a pepper jack is not bad, but there's a horseradish cheddar that I'm really partial to. That's a Wisconsin blend. Also, I mean, I do like a brie from time to time, but that's not particularly Wisconsin. That tends to be more French, the Costco varieties. I'm thinking of, and
Yes.
then there's two or three Costco ones that, Dubliner, which is an Irish, and then also I'm into there's a what do you call it? A uh, English cheddar. I forget. It's another that is another. It's a coastal Kirkland or something. It's so that's also a non-Wisconsin one. So I'm embarrassing my state. But if you ever have like fresh cheese curds out of the we're known for our cheese hats and stuff, right? But
Yes.
there's cheese factories here where there's cheese curds, and they actually got these big drum mixers that pummel this stuff around, and when you get that fresh out of the machine, it's you chew on it, it's like squeaky. It's a
Oh
real
wow.
nice it's like it's warm and squeaks, and it's a unique experience in itself. But yeah, there's some cranberry cheeses as well
Oh
uh,
wow.
that good taste. I do goat cheese too from time to time, but more Shabbat stuff really is
Ah.
gotta cheese up on Shabbat. So
I love that. Are you on social media?
I'm on Facebook, and right now I'm working with a team. We're looking to expand into Pinterest and X and Gab, I think, and Rumble, and I have a YouTube channel as well.
Oh.
So right now it's the Facebook and the YouTube channel that I've been doing. I've been doing the lion's share of interacting, but that's it's a love-hate relationship I have with those platforms between the shadow banning and all that stuff, and that's an easy thing to do. It's blame my lack of success for shadow banning.
I
Um,
mean,
there's
there's just facts. I mean, that's just it's what it is. Hold on, I'm getting the links. Shadow banning is a real thing.
Yeah.
It absolutely is. Here we go.
Well, to their defense, you start looking at the volume of content being shared. You have to pare it down at some point, because it depends upon how many people you're following, though. So if you're only following one person and then they post something and you're not seeing it, it's like, well, that's shadow banning. And so, I know that the system, I cannot predict where it seems to, block out more and less as far as the rhyme and the reason. I think they've taken their thumb off the scale a little bit, and in more recent times, I've had some better traction on social media a little bit, but and there's also more people are becoming aware and also realizing the significance and that this isn't just a fluke or a one-hit wonder. I mean, getting into the pastoral engagements, I can count the number of pastors who've reached out to speak of this on two hands, and that's since 2015. Okay, so if you look at like my recent ad with the I'm sorry, my recent thing with the flyover people, I mean, that generated like I don't know 70,000 views about, and haven't heard of any pastor touching base yet. So it's interesting that there's a certain amount of I don't know if it's what kind of phobia or just the fact that there's that many or not that many in the professionals. You'd think that the professionals would ear to the track and be all over stuff like this, but it's really not a priority in that world, I guess. But they have their churches, and that's the way they do business, and I suppose this it may be a threat to their business. I don't know. Um,
Okay, it is a total threat to their business. We're talking when you're bringing in the 501, 50 is it 503c
501 is 501c3. You think?
501c3. Yeah, you bring that in, and any pastor knows what they're doing. There's accountability. So you're standing in line. It's fear. Let's just boil it all down. It's fear, in my opinion. Oh, I mean, even can you imagine? Like, here's what I want to ask you: when you were in the tabernacle itself, did you feel the presence of God? Like, where you can is this where the conviction comes to? We need this here.
Well, when getting into Israel and standing in those tabernacles, I thought in the one model, I'm like, well, there's the air conditioning. And isn't that nice? Because they got a big air conditioner in the back because they have to, because it's a big hot box. Otherwise, it's sitting in the sun. It's like having your car rolled up and the windows rolled up on a hot day type thing. And it's a dead end from an airflow standpoint, big U shape, right? The open front, and then you just anyway. And so between Timna and an REL, so the Timna one had the air conditioning built in the back of it, and then the other one is just it was good shade, because it was very hot while I was there. It was an August time frame, and um,
Oh,
but
wow.
those locations weren't particularly whatever. But in Shiloh, Shiloh is where the tabernacle is said to have stood for 369 years. And they sit there's a stone thing. It looks like a platform, kind of. When I say kind of, it's not like they're pouring concrete slabs like we do, obviously. So if you look at their concrete slab, it's a stone slab, and it looks like it's kind of cut here and there a little bit. To me, it's a real stretch to think that thing was the tabernacle base. It's like, well, how do they know it wasn't an ancient McDonald's or marketplace for that matter? I mean, the fact that it has this proportion, they're like, yep, that's it, and it's like they find some holes in the ground there, and it's like, well, this is supposed to be where they put the fence posts and stuff. It's like, no, they wouldn't have made the fence posts that big because they weren't given that much material. And, I can go toe to toe with them like that, but they won't toe to toe because it's like, well, they got a narrative. They keep on pushing. And
That's the key.
there's digs going on to this day in Israel, and they find relevant things around there. They find bone piles, and more specifically, they're finding like the right bone of the animal. So there's the priest for the wave offering, they would use this. So it's clear that some, when I say clear, it's highly probable that those bone piles were in those proportions because they were doing priestly things there. But it also talks about taking the bones and burning them outside the camp. Okay. And so the fact that they find it that close to where they say the tabernacle was, either you got some lazy priests that don't want to walk more than 50 feet, and the fact that they're looking for them all there. My point is, if you're looking at this from a purely archaeological site, from that in that sense, how far outside of that little boxy area should you find this stuff? If you can think about this, you got all of Israel supposed to be coming here. That would have been hundreds of thousands of people in theory, and you're telling me that they're just throwing the bones like right over here. These people, they don't do math. I hate to say it, but to say that Bible scholars suck at math, is really really where I'm going. Because if you start looking at the ash, for example, so when you're burning animals in the remains and stuff like that, you would make an ash pile, and that ash pile, by mass, percentage of the mass, is about 2% of what the animal would originally weigh. And so within, I figured out for Solomon, for one of his, I want to say for one of his first like temple commissioning event, I think, I calculated the number of bulls was like, uh, was it 12,000 or 20,000? I forget. And then the number of sheep and goats was like 120. So you start looking at the weight of all the animals. So you're going to have the meat, but you're also going to have guts and bones. And so if you burn all that, that would what would be remaining behind in ashes would be enough to fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool. This is one event, and they had many. So where'd they go with all that ash? So is this all just left behind for disposal, or did they put it to use in their, fertilizers and the like, or is it that it's blended into the soil where no one can tell? What kind of archaeological remains do you expect to see in an ash pile? So if it's burned down all the way, then it would be an ash pile. Then you're not looking at remains, and if it's not burning well, then it's going to leave the solid bones behind. And so it's like they find this evidence, and it's like, well, it sounds compelling because it is the right thigh, thigh bone or what have you, which was tied into the priestly wave offering. But to say, look, now 20 feet down is where the temple altar was, or tabernacle altar was. I'm sorry, but that's not that's not all that rational to conclude that they were that lazy, or that would have been just a lone isolated pile there. But with it all being the right bone, it seems to speak to that. So I can't say that they never were lazy, or never were minimalist on their efforts on where to take those things. But it says in the text, outside the camp is where the balance is. It even says that in the New Testament, but the bodies were burned outside the camp, right? And it's referring to the burnt offerings, the animals, because they weren't burning all that on the all on this altar, because there's a certain space limitation. It's can only burn up so much so fast in that one location. So they don't factor in stuff like that, and the true human logistics side, as they start to explore and justify, interpret their site and their findings. They're just I think they're missing some context, which is a mixture of biblical as well as logistical, my opinion.
AKA common sense with math.
Sure, sure. It turns into common sense. I have that on my web page, on the front page. You don't need to be an engineer to apply common sense, and this is common sense. You start looking at it, it's like, yeah, it makes sense that they would do that and that and that. It's like, yep.
Yeah. It's very, very interesting. Thank you so much, Andrew. I really appreciate
You're welcome,
it.
Sandra.
All right, we need to do a thank you real quick. I want to do a thank you for the diamonds, for the lemons. Sunny came in, gave ice creams. Trog, thank you so much. Also, Ginger over at Pilled. So we're going to do a quick thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right. So I did post your YouTube. You guys, please go and follow. I will send you the show. But I want you to come back, because I enjoyed this
Can do.
so very much. Thank you. Thank you,
You're welcome.
everyone, for hanging out with us. We did good. This is a 3-hour show. You bringing me to the next level, Andrew.
Am I?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out. Do me a favor. Go follow Andrew. Go to his website. If you can support, we need to support. This is important. I want to be obedient. Like, I would love to go into the tabernacle and feel my God right there. Right? Like, how incredible. This is for all of us. This is for our fellow believers. This is for all of us. So it's very cool.
But to reconnect in that way, there is a there's an emotional. You're talking about Israel in the past, with the Shiloh, the sites where the tabernacle was. So a lot of people will get that sense of, like, okay, I'm in the presence of, and how much of it is kind of, in a sense, self-generated versus just, as mentioned before, coming to Israel, period. There's something very awakening there. So I don't want to discount it, but there's cases where they, in standing in that, because of their own emotional expectations, they will feel really moved, really strong in a lot of that. And I think that this is, if you listen to the testimony, there's a LDS group, Latter-day Saints group, that they got their kids involved with kind of reenacting priestly services and stuff. The testimonies they give, it's really kind of compelling. And it's like, well, this is why, you can't get out of religion. I say in the different places, religion is not a spectator sport. It's like, until we start to build and contribute and do, that whole, where your treasure is, your heart is also. You understand the commandments not by observing them, going by. Some people say they're Torah observant. It's like, what, are you just watching it? They're trying to convey the idea that they do it, they observe. Not that it's just not a matter of, like, eyeball observation. It's like, well, this is I hear and obey type thing. So So there are those things. It's like, well, what do we value as a nation? Do we value this to the point of saying, hey, let's make this, let's do this, let's experience this. And until people do that, you're just kind of, in a sense, going through the motions in some of this. So this is a testimony. Solomon tore that down. This is a testimony to Israel's history. It's a testimony to the God of the Bible. This is how he said, go and do this. So why not go and do it?
We got to go and do it. We got to do it.
If we build it, he will come. There's that.
You guys.
There's that field of dreams, right? There's a reference there. Right?
Well, I think it doesn't have to be a dream. It could be reality. We just got to get going. Action. That's what the bottom line is, action. Period. So don't talk about it, be about it.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you, Andrew.
All right, Sandra, thank you.
Thank you, guys. Have a great night. We'll see you later.
Thank you, audience. Bye.
Bye.
Do you see a declaration of war there? Absolutely. There is no substitute for victory. And in the Bible, Christians have one aim: victory over the world, over the flesh, and over the devil. We are here for total victory through the authority of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We're talking about powers and principalities in the heavenlies. There are supernatural beings that have structure and order who are under the command of the Prince of Darkness. Prayer is the weapon that God has given to his children to wage war in the heavenlies. And if you really get in a heavyweight fight, you're going to meet these people. And the way that you meet them is in the authority of Jesus' name. You bind them in your family. You bind them from your children. You bind them from your business. You bind them from your future. And you do so in the authority of Jesus' name. I am the Son of the living God. I have defeated death, hell, and the grave. I have taken the keys from you, and I have given it to the church triumphant. These people are covered by the shed blood of Jesus Christ. Set them free. They belong to me. Jesus is saying the government of the kingdom of darkness will never affect the righteous because I have defeated them. The gates of hell will not prevail against the church triumphant. He has broken the chain of sin and misery and announced, whom the Son sets free is free indeed. He is the Lion of the tribe of Judah. He is the Holy One who's going to sit on the throne of his father David in the city of Jerusalem. He's the one who's going to rule the nation with a rod of iron. Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior, the King of all kings and the Lord of all lords. Of his kingdom there shall be no end. Hallelujah to the Lamb of God. Is your marriage under attack? Pray. Is your child being tormented by the Prince of Darkness? Pray. Are you fighting a dreaded disease? Pray. Are you lost and without God? Pray. Is your life empty? Pray. Is your life meaningless and hopeless? Pray. 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 God answers prayer. The tragedy of our day is not unanswered prayer, but unoffered prayer. Why pray? Because anointed prayer raises above the need level. God is sitting in heaven saying, pray to me. Ask me for great things. Ask me to pull down strongholds. Ask me to break Satan's grip over your job, over your family. Elevate your prayer life from now I lay me down to sleep to spiritual warfare. Go to war in the authority of Jesus' name. When you pray, ask God for big things. Ask God for big things. Nothing is impossible with God. Ask him to defeat the giants in your life. When you have a big need, ask big. Ask him to send fire from heaven. Ask him to walk you through the fiery furnace. Ask him. He's the God who cannot fail. Ask Him to send revival to America. Ask Him for a righteous revolution. Ask Him for righteousness that exalts a nation. Mark 11:22. For verily I say unto you, whosoever shall not doubt in his heart, but shall believe that those things which he says shall come to pass, he shall have whatsoever he saith. God is not a statue of stone or wood. He speaks, He talks, He thinks, He feels your infirmities. He answers our prayer. He's alive. He is in this place. Jehovah Shalom, the Lord our peace, He is in this place. The victory is ours through Christ the Lord. Stop complaining about the attacks on your life by the prince of darkness. Attack him. Bind him in the authority of Jesus' name. Put your foot on the head of the devil and watch him squirm. The victory is ours through Christ the Lord. Satan is a defeated foe. Think like it, talk like it, act like it, pray like it. The victory is ours. John 14:14, if you ask anything in my name, I will do it. There's a pantheon of God. That's why the Lord's Prayer says, Our Father which art in heaven. That's the God we're talking to. That's why when we pray, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, there's only one God that answers to that. Behold, O Israel, the Lord your God is one. He is the only one.
Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that ye may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Wherefore, take unto you the whole armor of God, that ye may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand. Stand therefore, having your loins girt about with truth, and having on the breastplate of righteousness, and your feet shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace. Above all, taking the shield of faith, wherewith ye shall be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked. And take the helmet of salvation, and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, praying always with all prayer and supplication in the Spirit, and watching thereunto with all perseverance and supplication for all saints, and for me, that utterance may be given unto me, that I may open my mouth boldly to make known the mystery of the gospel, for which I am an ambassador in bonds, that therein I may speak boldly as I ought to speak. Peace be to the brethren, and love with faith, from God the Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. Grace be with all them that love our Lord Jesus Christ in sincerity. Amen.